Okay, we're here. We'll call this meeting to order. It's about 10 minutes after 1 o'clock. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the IID for January the 8th, 2013. If you please stand and join Director Benson as he leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Your hand over head. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome everyone today. This time we'll be reporting actions taken in closed session, if any.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. In connection with item C on the closed session agenda, the board took action to authorize staff to develop a stipulation of judgment as to certain parties in the QSA consolidated cases. That's all I have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. We're moving into the approval of agenda. Directors, do you have any comments or items that would need to be moved or pulled from the agenda?
I would ask that item 2 on the consent be pulled.
So that's item 2, Gloria, ratification of appointments to the Energy Consumer Advisory Committee, page 37 of the agenda to be pulled.
I have number 7 and number 11 be pulled off the agenda because they were sponsored by Bruce and he wasn't able to be here today.
So that's item 7, Gloria, local entity organization structure. Item 11, update on effectiveness of automated gates installed at IID facilities, as they've been requested by Director Kuhn, who's not with us today in public. For everyone's information, he did attend the full closed session. He's just not feeling well. So we'll pull those items.
I'm sorry, action item number 15, as we discussed earlier, it just needs further discussion and modification.
So, Gloria, that's also then action item 15, the approval of the general manager's 2013 plan of work for further modification and work before it can be adopted by this board. So, do I have a motion to pull those items and the modifications to the agenda?
I so move.
Second.
Motion from Galindo, second from Hanks. Any question? Call for the vote. Motion passes 4-0. Okay, this takes us into public comments. This time we have our public comment time period set up. Any public comments? Go ahead.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Hi, my name is Julian Escalera, president and owner of Escalera Stacking Farm Service Provider that applied for the mitigation money from the local entity on the following periods of 08, 09, 09, 10, and 10, 11. We are now in 2013, as you're well aware of. We began this process in applying for the money first part of June. We submitted the packet the 25th of June, which was the deadline. We haven't heard a word on our money. Evidently, it's our money. That's what it was designed for. Money at 08 doesn't compare to the money at 2013. Why it's taken so long, I have no idea. We talked to other farm service providers. They're wondering. They're not kept informed. There was a couple snags in it. They reapplied, and still nothing. We were hoping to get our money at the end of the year of 2012. So if there's any end in sight, we'd like to know. We'd like to have the information at least provided for us to do our planning financially. And if this is a problem, the way this process went, maybe it needs to be redesigned so it can be a lot quicker. Because we're talking 5 years that the water was sold and the work was not there. We're trying to recoup that money, and 5 years later, that's kind of hard to deal with, if you can understand where I'm coming from. At any rate, that was my comment. If you have any questions.
Gloria, do you have Chili's contact information? We'll look into that and get something back to you, as well as address it through a board meeting in the future. Mr. Kelly, how long has it been since we had a local entity in front of us for mitigation?
It's been in the last couple of months, but I am aware of this exorbitant delay, and we'll address it and be back with you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I will ask the general manager to put it on the next agenda for approval of disbursement. It's my understanding it's completed on the competitive side and non-competitive side.
Well, we're in the non-competitive.
Non-competitive, yeah.
Which was ahead of the competitive side.
Yeah, no, I mean, non-competitive, it's my understanding it is complete. Should
well.
be dispersed.
That'd be great. Thank you.
So we'll take a look at that, about getting that on the next agenda.
Mr. President, board members, I'm Lisa Gallané with Navy League Imperial Valley Council, and I have with me Ramiro Castillo with the Marine Corps League. This year, the Marine Corps League, the Navy League, and Pioneer Van and Storage partnered together for the Marine Corps' Reserve Toys for Tot program. And we were authorized to place receptacle boxes throughout the district offices, various locations. And this year, we exceeded last year's receipt of gifts through the program in excess of approximately 4,500 toys. And it was through the generosity of district employees with those throughout the county that we were able to meet this goal. And Ray and I are here to present to the district a certificate of appreciation for their participation and a challenge coin. We again appreciate the opportunity to participate and have the district employees participate in the program. We look forward to being able to do that again next year.
Lisa, how many years has the IID been participating with the leagues?
This was the very first year.
The first year. Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, I moved, she asked me to move, so I moved, right? She's our boss. Yeah. It's my pleasure to present the certificate through our sponsors, through IID Board and Kevin, to representing the IID Board. I want to make a little comment that for at least the last 40 years, Imperial County has had unemployment rates of over 38%, at least 90% of the time. And this community, Imperial Valley, although it's poor, it's very giving. And we have organizations such as the Navy League and IID Board and the cities throughout Imperial County that assist us in providing the service to the needy. And our program is to try and bring Christmas to children and otherwise may not be able to have that experience. So again, I want to thank the community of Imperial Valley, the Navy League, Pioneers Van and Storage, for helping our program, Toys for Tots, which is a Marine Corps Forces Reserve program. It began in 1947, and since then we've given out maybe 238 million toys. And we're represented in about 380 communities throughout the nation, and we have programs outside the country as well. And again, I want to give thanks to the community of Imperial County and IID through its person that is known throughout the valley, represents the IID, Kevin Kelly. Thank you. My pleasure, brother. And here's a certificate for everyone to enjoy and a challenge coin. Thank you. Sorry, brother. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ricardo Servin. Panguillar and Ricardo Servin, we represent a non-profit organization called Custom Desert Bandit. We come here to give an award to the IID director, but they put in supervisor, but they made a mistake. but I was looking to give this back to the IID directors.
That's for all the donations you have given us, and
for the help on the scholarships and Christmas parades.
You guys want to take a picture with the board? We can do this?
Yeah.
Board, would you come down and join?
We are a non-profit organization. We help kids in sports. We give a scholarship for the high school. They're going to go to college. It's a non-profit organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you very much.
Is Lisa still here with the other organization, the Boys for Tots? Maybe Marina? We'll do better on those pictures anyway.
Hi. Good afternoon. I'm Sophia Peralta, widow of Burgueño for the past 6 months. I actually, excuse me, I was belittled, traumatized, felt very unuseful when I had to deal with my light. I was moving from the process of my land to the new senior apartments, and I misplaced some of my receipts, 2 of them, and I had my light turned off from the 27th of December till January the 3rd. I tried getting some information of how I could get assistance to get it back on. I didn't want to ask my children, my daughters that were married. My son, he's unemployed right now, but he's barely going to get his unemployment. And it was circumstances that I was used to working and my husband used to working, seeing and knowing that the Valley had resources in different programs, supposedly to assist us in a situation like this. I went to CUI. They gave me the runaround. Then they finally told me that they had run out of funds. I said, please give me a letter stating that you ran out of funds. So they did. I have that. I went to the welfare department, general relief. They said that wouldn't even be an emergency, I didn't even bother to turn in the papers. I went to the Salvation Army. They had run out of funds. I came to the IID. They said because I hadn't filled out a form and I didn't have to have no balance, and I just really had already sent in through the mail. It says even if you qualified, you will not qualify if you have any outstanding balance. I said, then how do you assist? I've worked so many years. My husband worked so many years. What's going on with the senior programs or programs that are supposed to assist us when our income actually drops? Why are we being given the runaround like we don't know what we're doing? Actually, I mean, the circumstances, I was traumatized. My husband died from one day to another. And it was a whole different emotional, physically, and just a transition I've been going through. And then you feel belittled. You feel like they're actually, the people around you, when you ask them, like you don't have a sound mind, you don't know, you're catching Alzheimer's. No, it's not that. It's just the circumstances that you're going through. And it was cold and dark in my apartment. My kids, they did say, Mom, you come to the house, and my sisters and mothers. And I've paid into the IAD for years and years, like my husband. My husband worked over 45 years. Tractor driver. He planted, he cultivated, he landscaping, he worked with the hay too, and I worked in all different areas myself till I got hurt. But I've worked in a lot of different programs, and I've worked in the clinic, the hospital, CUI, colleges, community worker for senior citizens up north. But it's just circumstances that our income is not there, and they're always questioning me. I'm not going to do something that's illegal. I like to do the proper things, but we're misjudged, and we're also treated like, you feel like dirt. To that extent. And I know we are valuable because we are Americans, and there is supposed to be justice here with our civil rights that we do have. And I would appreciate it for us seniors, or the baby boomers that are 1950s, and everyone else that's a senior, no matter what race we are, we're all human beings, and we are the children of the Lord. We are the children of this country, this beautiful United States of America. And we need to do something better to help each other and treat each other with more dignity, more respect, and there has to be more love among us, not because of social background or color or race. Whatever status, like you're so rich, you're middle, you're low. I saw everybody got sick. It didn't matter what color. Everybody, we tried to treat them properly. And I wish this is the way we would be treated, with dignity and respect and properly, and simplify it for other people that cannot understand certain more higher educated words, bring it down to their level, or have someone help them. We need help, and we would appreciate it. And I like to work, but I got hurt. Thank you very much. I really appreciate everything.
Did you get your power turned on and resolved?
I had to borrow against the money of my widow's benefits against it in the bank.
We have an item on the agenda today for action. For your information and the rest of the attendees in the room today, in regards to electrical service disconnects and how we handle those situations, and we're taking actions to address those, to be more user-friendly, more humane about those actions.
I appreciate that. Thank you, sir.
Do you need additional contact information with our agency, with someone here at the IID?
I would appreciate it if I could.
All right, I'm writing down a gentleman's name here, and I'll give you his name and phone number. Mario, I'm going to give him Danny Hurtado's name and number. So if we could follow up with her to see what we can do to straighten this situation out.
Certainly, President Desert, but in fact, I've got Sherry McDonald in the audience, and we can actually get her information right now as soon as she's done and take care of this now.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So who should she talk with? No. Thank you, Sher. And this is Dan's phone number.
Oh, thank you very much,
Thank
sir.
you.
I'm Sophia.
Thank you, Sylvia.
Thank you.
I'm Ruben Casares. I'm an IID employee. And for the lady, we did have some concern, and we did express them to our directors. And what's good for the Valley is we do have a new set of directors, and there is going to be a lot more compassion. I've been out in the field, and I've seen the causes against our customers. And we have employees who really care quite a bit for our customers, and we do have a good set of directors. So hopefully, as we address individuals with delinquent power bills, there will be a lot more compassion. because every time I go out to a person's neighbor, I try and show as much compassion as I can. And I'm glad you came up here. It's good for the entire community. Behind me, I have Denise Guerrero. She's Children's Program Coordinator for Center for Family Solutions of Imperial Valley. And in conjunction with Toys for Tots, we also ran our toy collection, and we had some collection boxes scattered throughout the entire district. We've been doing this for 3 years now, and it's a great pleasure because one advantage I've had, I've been the service rep for 16 years. I've gone through many neighborhoods. I've gone through entire Imperial Valley. I've seen the good side of the rich side of town. I've seen the middle class. I've seen the poor. I've seen the families where there's a mother and father, where the children are being well taken care of. I've seen residences where there's no father. And the children, they're looking, they don't have the economy that we have, and they don't receive the toys that many of our kids receive. About the only time they actually receive a toy is in December, because that's when everyone's aware that this is the month of, for the children. And when I read the newspaper, the IV Press, I see all these different organizations giving toys. You see the Border Patrol, you see the correctional officers, you see the various police departments. And here we are, IID. We have 1,000 employees here in Imperial Valley. So for ourselves, we became involved. And we have to become involved because this is our valley. This is the people that we see on a daily basis at the restaurants, at the stores. This is our community. And so December is a good time to show compassion, and it's a good time to give toys to the kids, and the kids really appreciate it. So for us employees who do contribute, it's a great feeling to, at least we did some good, and that's what it's all about. So I'd like to present Denise Guerrero. She's in charge of Center for Family Solutions of Imperial Valley.
Just how Ruben mentioned, I work for a center where we are against domestic violence. This year, I had 94 families that were really in need. All these families are single mothers, victims of domestic violence, and they all needed some type of assistance when it comes to Christmas presents for their children. They're more concerned about the children. So this year, IID helped us with toy donations, and as a result, all these children that needed assistance got a present for this Christmas. So I want to thank IID for your support, and hopefully we could keep having this relationship more years to come.
Thank you, Denise.
Okay, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thanks to Mr. Kevin Calley. He's been very useful, very supportive, and as Denise mentioned, we want to continue this even after we retire. We want it to be a permanent feature of the IAD as December to always give out toys to the kids. Mr. Kevin, I'd like to present that to you. And once again, we'd like to thank all the employees who did make a contribution. It's good to, when we search out the boxes, it's good to find toys inside the boxes. It's really great. And so the employees, we did extremely well. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Casares. Mr. McFadden.
Mr. President, Dilda McFadden. I come before you today to extend an invitation to all the board members and IID staff that would like to participate in an annual Dr. Martin Luther King prayer breakfast, which will take place on January the 18th at the old Eucalyptus building at 8 o'clock in the morning. So I'm just here. IID has always been gracious enough to support this event, and today I just wanted to come and to give you a personal invitation to the event. It's going to be a really nice event, and a lot of you were there last year, and we hope that you come out and join us this year. January 18th at 8 a.m. at the old Eucalyptus, and I believe there's been some invitations and things sent out to you. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Mr. McFadden. Any further comments from the public? Welcome, Mr. Ramos.
Good afternoon. My name is Tony Ramos. This hat right now, one of the ladies asked me, am I free? But it was just a question. It wasn't nothing offensive. And this is what states for that you're free to in the United States to go anywhere, especially in these meetings where the public input is very important. Whether the board or anybody here agrees with me, I'm known for making comments sometimes that people don't like, but I never do anything intentional. I have no resentment or anger towards someone because I sponsored In God We Trust. And in God We Trust, I have to live up to what I say. But if I become a little irritated towards people, that's me, that's not God. I thought I'd say that. And board members, there's three things real quick. Mr. Desert, I hope you guys research the fact that you've gotten your meetings down from 2 meetings to... I'm losing it here. There's meetings right now. You're going to have it from 3 to 2 meetings, right?
Scheduled meetings, most likely we'll have just as many, if not more, with the addition of special meetings that are focusing on subjects.
I hope you keep up with what you did before, Mr. Blizzard, because you're the head honcho there, and Mr. Hanks is the other one, and I hope you advise the other board members that are new to this that it's public opinion and public comments and everything that's important. Also, that says that you're not going to have any evening meetings, and the quinta meetings will go down to 2 per year instead of 4. And that the other thing I'm disturbed is that why Mr. Garber isn't here. The public, this is going to come out on channel, whatever channels come out. I never see it myself, but it's going to come out. The public is aware of what's going on. Why Mr. Garber, all of a sudden, when the new board came in, was dismissed. I know Mr. Kelly took blame for it, but I think the board knew about it before, and I don't like that. The Bible says here, and like I said, it says, whoever oppresses the poor to increase his own wealth and give to the rich will only come to poverty. And I hope that I'm wrong, that this board wasn't made up and they want in order to help the well-to-do, the people that already have enough, at the expense of the elected, the people that elected you in, the new board, to help the ones that already have so much. And I do want to say, this is Mr. Benson's flyer, and he says that return $140 million in overcharge power rates to customers. I hope you do. I'm going to be writing a letter soon to the newspaper about this board and some people in this board, and it takes time for me because I'm not very good at doing it just right on the spot, like the guy over there in the corner from the Ivy Press. But the thing is, Mr. Desert, I hope you listen to me. I hope that at least if you don't agree with me, that you and Mr. Hanks listen to me. And also, I'll end with this. When I left probation 4 or 5 years ago, people didn't like me there. And somebody wrote a phantom letter to the board, to the newspaper, trying to get me fired, affecting my pension, my well-being, my family. I would never do that. And these people that did that to me now are going through hell. Karma is bad, and I'm not going to mention who they are, but they are. And that's why I'd like to give this letter to you, Mr. Board, Mr. Desert, and the board member, if you could disperse it. This is an evil and vicious, venomous letter, and I wanted the board and Mr. Kellner them to get a copy of it and save one for Mr. Kuhn, because we have no room for this. This letter was written against Stella Mendoza. Vicious, evil, poisonous. Nobody signed it. Phantom letter. If anybody here knows who these people are or what they did, stay away from them, because they're going to do is bring bad karma to you and everybody else who touches you. It's not good, and I bring it to here because Stella is gone now. She's happy with what she's doing. Leave her alone. Leave me alone as far as writing a letter against me if you plan to. If you want to criticize me, do it up here. But this letter is evil. It's poisonous. It's not the type of letter that anybody would write. And I feel that all it does is separate the good we're trying to do here. I'm not a man I'm not a man that resents people. I can't, the Bible says that if you hate your enemy and you hope him fall down, it'll come back to you. It will. I believe that. And contrary to what you see here, I'm not a man that tries to create controversy, but I challenge it when I see something's wrong, Mr. Desert. And I'm glad that you let me pass the 2 minutes and let the other people pass after the 3 minutes, because sometimes you, as a chairman, can let people talk further. All I'm asking is, let's unite, let's work together. Now, whether we do that or not, it's going to be up to you as a board member, because you're the ones that are sitting there making decisions. Very, very difficult, especially with the water issues. So I ask you, Mr. Desert, Mr. Hanks, and the other members to see what we can do to do work in the best interest of the public. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ramos. Any further public comments? Okay, we'll turn this over for board member comments. We'll start with Director Benson.
Just want to welcome everyone here. It's a full house, so I won't take too long. Happy New Year. And just want to let everyone know I am looking for it. I haven't seen this letter, and Tony, I'll take a look at it. But, I'm here to mend fences and kind of bring the farming community back to the discussion on water issues. Also, there's a lot of important issues related to the budget of the IID. And as we go through those, it'll become apparent that this board is trying to work in everyone's interest in keeping rates low. It is a difficult decision on what you do with the ECA that was over-collected in the past. Last night, the ECAC met, and there were pros and cons of raising rates, not raising rates, so we'll tackle those issues as they come forth. But I'm open to discussion if anyone ever wants to call me. I received several calls this week regarding agenda items, and just want to let you know that my number is posted, I believe, on the ID site, or an email if you want to get a hold of me. I live in Brawley, but I do travel south of Keystone, so appreciate your time. Thanks.
Director Galindo.
Thank you and welcome, everyone. I also wish that this year will bring us all health and goodwill. And I am also available. My telephone number is posted on the website, and it is 554-1886. You're all welcome to call me. I do return my phone calls, albeit not necessarily the same day. I am here to serve the public, serve everyone, all of my constituents, regardless of what their predilections are. And I would like to continue to tell you that I will be accountable for my decisions, whether they are good, bad, or indifferent. I can at least offer you a reason as to why I have voted in what direction. I have a great deal of hope that this board is able to work together this year, and whereas we don't all see things the same, we are congenial and we're working off the same page for the welfare of the institution as well as for the people of Imperial County. Thank you.
Director Hanks.
First of all, I'd like to thank our employees for the toy drives. I know that's ongoing. I've seen them taking out truckloads, literally truckloads of toys. And that tells us a lot about our employees. As we know, they also contribute very heavily to the United Way. Also, I heard the lady that spoke about her power being turned off. I heard you. And in fairness to some of our employees, they are implementing the policies that we set. And when we know there's policies out there that create these type of situations, we need to change them. Also, I'm encouraged with this board. I'm sure that we're not going to agree on everything, but we will be able to openly discuss and share ideas. We have some major issues coming up on water with our payback overruns, fouling program on farm, and system conservation. Try to implement, get it to work. At the same time, we also have litigation ongoing, particularly dealing with the Salton Sea, which I intend to watch very closely. as far as I know, everything that the IED has agreed to, we're trying to uphold and perform up to the benchmarks required of us. And I'm going to expect the same of the others that signed on with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Hanks. Yeah, it's been an interesting beginning of the new year. For everyone's information, this is the third meeting of the new board. Over the holidays, we had some visits set up with some of the IED facilities, including the SOC, which is the on the power side, which watches over our electrical grid and keeps it safe and maintained. Also, a water control, which does the same thing on our water side, watching our water deliveries and our reservoirs that are used for conservation purposes, and including our spills. We also had visits at the energy department with the trading group, the energy and natural gas trading group that's been set up, as well as a visit with the CFO's office. And that was primarily for the new board members, and I thank those new board members for their participation in that. We have activities going on at the ID that are front and pressing for everyone, including the budget. We made some progress in moving forward with what our power rates are going to look like. There was a slight presentation last night at the ECAC, which opened the door for what our rate structure is going to look like. Ideally, there will be no rate impact, and we'll be able to straighten out our rates where we have adequate funding in our power side from our base rate, and our flexible floating ECA rate is structured in a way that, in fact, redistributes some of that over collection of our ECA, which has been talked about so much in so many election campaigns, including today with a flyer that Mr. Benson put out. We have an issue today that's of great interest to the ag community. I think that's why we have a large turnout here today from the ag side. There was a recent presentation at the WCAB involving water deliveries and water usage and water spills. And there's a follow-up report today that hopefully addresses and answers those questions and concerns. This presentation will also be discussed this Thursday at the WCAB meeting when this situation was first brought to everyone's attention. So I ask you to bear with us and participate in a genuine discussion and efforts to make corrections and make the IED a better agency and utility that it can be. I'd like to welcome everyone, and it's good to see such a large population in the audience that are not IED staff members. So with that being said, we'll move on to the general manager's comments.
Yes, President Desert, members of the board, I'm going to try to be as precise as I can be without working from prepared remarks. But in closed session today, it was apparent that the IID board wishes for the general manager to arrange for an independent review of its many and far-flung legal needs as they're being handled by outside counsel. Specifically, the board is concerned about an over-reliance on one firm, Atkins, and I intend to cause such an independent review to take place. It'll be along the lines of the prudence review that some of you will recall from the energy side, and the board will follow up on its own in closed session with the principals from that law firm on January 24th in closed session. And I'm sure that there'll be more to say about that as we progress. And finally, I do want to bring to the board's attention that IID staff attorney Joanna Smith has taken ill and will not be available in open session to do the item having to do with outside legal counsel in the water arena. And I would ask the board's indulgence to reschedule that item for the meeting on the 22nd. That's all.
Mr. Taylor, do we have some comments?
No comments, Mr. President.
Okay, that moves us into the consent item of the agenda. Today we have only one item under consent. It includes some 6 sets of minutes for the months of November 16th through December 18th.
I make a motion to approve with a correction on the December 18th meeting, changed from moved by Director Kuhn to moved by Director Benson, second by Director Galindo, that the board approve the calendar of the Imperial Irrigation District Board of Directors.
Okay, looking for a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
I'll second the motion.
So we have a motion, that was a motion
That
from
was a
Director Hanks?
motion with the minute.
Motion from Director Hanks, a second by Director Benson to accept the minutes as amended per Director Hanks today. Any further discussion? Call for the vote. Consent item passes 4-0. This takes us to the information portion of our agenda. Information item 3, page 38 of your agenda. This is an update on the 2012 legislative activities by lobbyist Jack Gualco.
Good afternoon, President Desert, members of the board. Antonio Ortega, IID Government Affairs. As you are already aware, our state lobbyist is the Gualco Group, and they represent us not only before the state legislature, but also before the executive branches of government in Sacramento. Here with us today is the president of the Gualco Group, Jackson Gualco, who will be providing you with a short recap of activities in 2012, but also with an overview of issues that are coming in 2013, which are of importance to the IID. And there in your background information is a memo that Mr. Gualco prepared for you, where he does detail some of those items. So at this time, I will invite him to address you and answer any questions that you may have.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, board members, members of the public, and distinguished IID staff. It's a pleasure to be back before you to talk about, I think, what we were able to accomplish in the course of 2012, and to, I think, say basically that the status of relations between IID and the state of California, generally speaking, are very good. And lines of communication between the governor's office and this district, your legislative representatives, and the key committees that oversee what IID does, I think couldn't be better. And I'd like to focus on a few issues that I raised in the memo with you in capsulized form. First of all, much of our attention last year was spent on making sure that the value of your biomethane contract was protected. And there was quite a row in the energy world about the role of biomethane, how it ought to count in the renewable world. And we were able, working with other publicly owned utilities, to make sure that that's something that can be settled fairly and squarely in front of the Energy Commission. And the chairman, Bob Weissenmiller, is fully aware that IID is interested in getting that to final resolution and looks forward to working with this district, and is eager to sit down with Kevin Kelly and other key folks from the district to make sure that that issue and others that I'll talk about are fully and capably addressed. The second issue was to deal with kind of an interesting item that was raised not by a member of your delegation, but by our friend, former Majority Leader Chuck Calderon. Well, he was going to figure out ways to make algae a commercial venture here in the Imperial Valley. But unfortunately, when that bill was first introduced, the ability of the district, particularly as a landowner, was impaired. And so we spent a lot of time working through that issue, and ultimately the bill failed, although with many of the discussions we had with the Majority Leader, most of the items that IID wanted to have included to protect its interests as a landowner in particular were going to be properly dealt with. So overall, 2012 was a year that we were able to mitigate any potential damage to the district and make sure that your interests were fully and properly represented. 2013 is going to be a very interesting year. 39 new members of the legislature, and your state senator is left to go to Congress, and so we're going to have a special election to fill that seat. So for the intervening period, we're going to be without a senator, which is always a precarious position to be in. But we wish former Senator Vargas well, and he was an outstanding member to deal with and very responsive to whatever IID brought to him, as is Assemblymember V. Manuel Perez. So as we go around and get to start to meet some of these new members, we're finding that their backgrounds are varied. A lot of them came out of local government. Some came out of publicly owned utility world, and that will, of course, help us in our dealings on both the water and power side. So let me deal with both of those issue areas. First, on the water side of the equation, we expect a good amount of time to be spent looking at ways to reconfigure the water bond, which has been delayed from the original date now to November of 2014. The leadership in both houses, the governor, have all indicated that they'd like to see the bond reduced in size, reduced in scope, and generally reconfigured. And to make that happen is going to take a 2/3 vote. And as you know from reading the newspapers and looking at the results of the elections, both houses are populated with 2/3 Democratic majorities. In fact, a little more than 2/3 in the upper house. But trying to find the sweet spot to put together, to reconfigure like Humpty Dumpty, the water bond is going to be a challenge at best. And so we expect to be fully engaged in that. And there is money set aside for the Salton Sea restoration and money for the Colorado Region Integrated Regional Water Management Program. So that is going to be a big issue. One of our members of our firm is co-chairing a advisory panel at the State Water Resources Control Board to look at ways of mitigating compliance costs for the regulated community. And that's being co-chaired with a woman who represents the Agricultural Council of California. And I think that's gotten off to a good start. And the Water Board has been very clear about they'd like to see some definite progress made on the costs of complying. And this district is one of the largest payers as by virtue of the fact that you're one of the single largest holders of water rights in California, is paying more than your fair share to the Water Rights Fund. And on the energy side, we fully expect that there could be some discussions about boosting the RPS requirements to 40% at some point, and we fully expect that there's going to be continued discussion, particularly after the FERC report comes out, about how well the balancing authorities are coordinating with one another, and that I expect to be something that we fully engage in moving into 2013. And so we expect a very, very busy year, and much of what we do is to be your eyes and ears on a day-to-day basis in the Capitol with the executive branch, being able to respond to people's questions about what's going on at IID, what direction you're taking, and we have the good pleasure of working closely with Antonio, who's turned out to be just fabulous, and Jennifer, and of course Kevin. So you've got a great team that we get to work with, and we look forward to working particularly with the new directors whom we haven't had a chance to work with yet. So, President Matt, I'm more than ready to answer questions if are there any from the board members.
Jack, how many years have you been performing this work for the IID?
Since the young days of 1986.
1986, and this is both power and water representation.
Yes, correct. I was here when Mr. Benson's father was on the board. Yeah.
And on the power side issues, we have something that's been on the back burner that we'd like to try to move forward and really take a hard look on it. That's what do we call that?
Parasitic load or station power?
Yeah, the pleasant word is institutional load. The parasitic isn't a popular term. Or
probably
word.
A better term to use, yeah.
Right. So that's something I know that I'm very interested in, and I believe the other board members are to pursue in a very firm direction, because it would prove to be such a benefit to the Imperial Valley and the IID, especially if California continues to move even further forward with the renewable requirements.
Well, as it turns out, because Antonio's raised this with us a couple of times, and it's one of the items we mentioned to Chairman Weisenmiller when we had lunch with him last week, just to kind of basically set the scene for greater discussions between the Energy Commission and IID, and he's fully aware of your interest in moving ahead with that issue.
Yeah, for the audience, this would not only help the IID and the ratepayers, but it would also to help our geothermal generators and their business models. You see, they generate energy that they use themselves in order to make the energy that they market and sell. So that's energy that's generated within our balancing authority, the IIDs, and utilized but no one's getting credit as far as the renewable energy requirements. So it is a tremendous positive for our area to take advantage of our resources as we need to do, and as elected board members we need to look after. So it's just really hard to fathom what this could actually mean to the IID and the generators and the ratepayers, but it is something you'll be hearing more about.
If I could add to that, as you're aware of our water transfer, there is tremendous pressure put on us on the methodology used to conserve water. And one of them, which is we find very prohibitive, is the use of energy for pumps, pump-back systems, and so forth. I think along the same line as the institutional or station load, I think there should be some consideration given statewide to recognize energy used to conserve water or produce water should be credited as a green product.
Okay.
I think that would be helpful too.
Well, as you know, there's discussion about trying to get a large hydro to be counted towards the RPS requirement as well, and we always run into quite the backlash from the environmental community on that issue. But I hear what you're saying, Director Hanks.
We'd be happy just to get a larger percentage, or some of that percentage of larger hydro within our system.
Yeah. I do want to mention that Carl Stills and Kevin have been participants in the weekly calls with the governor's office on making sure that all your transmission-related issues, your renewable power developments, are fully explained and understood by the governor's office, and includes other parties like SDG&E, the renewable developers. So I want to give them, public recognition for their persistence and participation in those weekly calls that the governor's office convened, and I think they've been very helpful in getting the governor's office to better understand the kinds of issues that IID itself is facing. And would like to mention, too, that one of my former staffers, former Chief Clerk of the Assembly, Brian Kidney, who cut his lobbying teeth after leaving the legislature, was involved in working closely with then Assemblyman Dave Kelly to make sure that IID's model program of triploid carp, or sterile carp, to clean your irrigation ditches. Brian passed away just a few days ago, and he was instrumental in moving that bill through the legislature with Mr. Kelly, and I just want to publicly recognize Brian for his good work and the work he did on your behalf.
Thank you for that.
Jack, on the water bond, I know it has its focus in Northern California and the Bay Delta area, but at this end of the state, we also look at that bond to try to measure what the state's commitment is, what value they put into the signature that they place on the QSA dealing with the Salton Sea. Before they were talking like $9 billion, something like that, with $100 million going to the sea, which was minuscule for a $9 billion bond. But even more so, I think it sends a message back to us. So we need to send them a message, when they're worried about financial cliffs and so forth. There is a QSA cliff, and it's called the Salton Sea.
I think there will be an interest on the part of Mr. Perez and whoever succeeds Senator Vargas in the upper house to try to get that money boosted, despite the efforts by a lot of other parties to reduce the overall amount. I mean, it currently stands at a little over $11 billion, and I think there's a great amount of interest in getting it down to the $5 to $7 billion range. And Aqua, of which you're a member, will be, I think, starting to convene some discussions. And then at some point, I expect, given the fact that there are 3 bills that have been introduced already on the subject, that the members of the legislature themselves and their staffs will start to put together working groups. And so we'll make sure that you're fully apprised of those and can participate, and I think make what's a very valid case.
Jack, also, as we move forward with this new board, this new board has expressed a need, if not a demand, for better communication with other agencies in water issues, if not all agencies, even including the state, This is in regards to QSA activities with legal matters. This board no longer can stand by and have the legal side of things taking care of making decisions for it. And are also on, such as the Minute Order 319, where the Metropolitan Water District and IID appeared to come to odds, and the IID was not able to sign on and participate in the Minute 319 order the way it was currently structured. So I just want to encourage you to make sure any kind of communication in the future gets to this board, and it's not only for your ears in the audience, but it's for the general managers and the water department members that are here, that this board is demanding to be engaged and participate.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question related to your first on energy, the RPS requirement moving to 40%. I assume that they understand it's going to raise rates, and we're already facing increase in the ECA over the long term as we move up our RPS requirements. What is the push from the state on that? Is it happening? Is there a timeline?
No, it's the usual crowd from primarily the environmental community that are always wanting to push the envelope. And Mayor Villaraigosa from LA had made the claim that that's where LA DWP wants to go. And so I just raise it as something that I expect at some point may surface.
Okay.
Although, as like Carl can probably tell you, there was a joint staff workshop between the Energy Commission and the Public Utilities Commission, and all of a sudden they found another 25% in RPS electrons that are available to help meet the 33% target. So that provided some relief on the supply side, but I'm very cautious about what some of the renewable community will say, and also what the environmental community will say about the need to continue to have California play in this leading edge kind of role between RPS and climate change. And so it's something we'll pay close attention to.
And the solar versus geothermal play is always going to be there, right? As far as they're treating it just as neutrons of power or whatever. It's not a credit for one type of power over another.
No. And although you're in a marvelous position, as you know, given your geothermal resources, and with the problem with San Onofre and the lack of good baseload power, I think the value of geothermal from this area is going to continue to increase. There's no doubt about it.
Okay. And then you also had on here the Clean Energy Job Creation Fund, and jobs was a big issue in the election, and it continues to be a big issue. What's the push for funding to create jobs down here in the Valley? And it just doesn't affect us, it's all the local government as well.
Right. Well, I think in the near term, just on the energy side, it'll be through Prop 39, and there's bills out there to try to direct how that money's used on the energy efficiency side. And schools are being very vigilant about making sure that they're in the front of the queue. And with good reason, because they're very worried about what the governor's going to be announcing here on Thursday with his budget and his proposed educational reforms and prison reforms. So there's people are feeling a little bit off balance at this point. But I think the biggest push, and you're finally hearing it from quarters in the legislature and the governor's office that you may not have heard from it really much before, which is the need to focus on getting rid of regulatory requirements that are impacting the ability to attract and or retain jobs in California. And your own Mr. Perez is the chair of the committee that has responsibility for that whole area, and he's been very, very active. And I know he talks all the time when we hear him on the floor in the assembly of the particular situation facing unemployment here in the Imperial Valley, and he's very focused on it.
Okay.
Any further questions?
I just have a couple of comments. On the energy side, on the RA, or the reliability adequacy that was assigned to IID by one of the commissioners, it really hasn't materialized. We have one project that's interconnecting to the IID, but it's stalled before PUC, and look like they're trying to give it a haircut as far as the cost of the project. And we have a couple more that's been approved, small projects, but nowhere near the expectancy for this area. We're looked at and expected to have a robust transmission system, but yet the revenue that would provide that is being withheld. particularly in the inability of our geothermals to get PPAs.
Right.
I think, there needs to be some consideration. The bill was passed. I mean, you might as well put the name Imperial County on it when they wrote it, but yet, it still hasn't really developed the way that we intended or expected it to. And then on a separate note, I think this would be a fair statement. My colleagues can correct me if I'm wrong, but you'll probably see a little different direction coming from this board than what you have been receiving. And I would advise you to take the directives from our representative general manager or his designee. And if they come from a different direction, including attorneys, that you vet that information back with our general manager. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have comments from the public.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack. Okay, moving on to information item number 4. This is page 44 of the agenda, a review list of current and suggested appointees to various committees. So this is an information item. We'll be coming back in the future for action. I've had some discussion with the other board members about the makeup of this list, and so I'll read through it with the board and the public at this time in case there's been some changes or corrections. Although I also asked Dee Bradshaw to come forward after that to talk with us about the Coachella Valley Association of Governments Conservation Commission, which we have 2 members that we still need to appoint. So for the Calexico Enterprise Zone, we're going to add Norma Galindo to that, so she'll be attending those meetings along with Antonio Ortega. For the Colorado River Commission, the appointment will go to Director Hanks, when the alternate position going to Director Benson. California Farm Water Coalition will be Director Benson. Imperial County Transportation Commission will be Director Kuhn. Imperial Valley Economic Development Corporation will be going to Director Benson. And the Imperial Valley Enterprise Zone at this time has Director Hank's name on it. We'll be having some further discussion on that. For the International Boundary and Water Commission, Colorado River Citizens Forum, that'll be Director Kuhn. And the Salton Sea Authority will be Director Hanks and myself, Director Desert. So that's the way it stands at this time. We'll discuss it further on an individual basis, and this will come to us for action at our next board meeting, and we can amend it or adjust at that time. Dee, if you could share with us a little bit about the Coachella Valley Association of Governments Conservation Commission. There's 2 board members that are appointed on that at this time, and we need to fill those. So
Yes.
I wanted to share with the board what those activities are and what it entails before we discuss who's going to be sitting there in those chairs.
Sure. I also developed a position paper that I was going to give to the board member that's selected as the commissioner, and then I also seeking an alternate.
So is it just one board member that attends, or do they want both?
It's one board member and then an alternate in case the board member is not able to be the commissioner.
Okay.
Just a little background. I know the agenda is lengthy, so I'll be brief. 2002, IID was invited by Coachella Valley Association of Governments, CVAG, to participate in the Coachella Valley Multi-Species Habitat Conservation Plan. The benefits to IID are great. We would have all of our operations, our preventive maintenance, and our safety activities for our existing facilities in Riverside County, including our rights-of-way for our electric distribution, transmission, and our facilities like our substations, our existing substations, and our communication sites, under the umbrella of a habitat conservation plan and a natural communities conservation plan. So the 2 environmental Endangered Species Act protection plans would be covered, especially in conservation areas. This is beneficial just looking at our Path 42. having a commissioner on the Coachella Valley Conservation Commission, which is a JPA, it must be made up of elected officials, means that IID would go before the commission, and having a commissioner that's an IID board member is beneficial to IID. So in 2005, IID joined the Coachella Valley Conservation Commission, the JPA, and like I said, it oversees the MSHCP and administers required environmental monitoring and mitigation. The MSHCP is a permit that lasts 75 years. Since the creation of the Coachella Valley Conservation Commission, IID has been represented by Directors Menville and Sanchez, with Director Mendoza as the alternate. The meetings are monthly. There are some dark monthly meetings, and the meetings are located at the CVAG offices, which are in Palm Desert, but we can participate via teleconference as well. And how that works is I just have it in my office, and the board member attends the teleconference with me in my office, and it's noted and posted correctly. So the agenda is not usually very lengthy, but participation in the Coachella Valley Conservation Commission also lends to the following meeting, which is the CVAG Energy and Environment meeting. So whoever the commissioner is usually also represents the district in the E&E meeting, which is a CVAG committee meeting.
Those meetings are held back to back?
They're held back to back. The CVCC starts at 11, and CVAG, the E&E meeting, starts at noon. If we were in Palm Desert, they provide lunch.
And when this was formed, this committee, it was formed specifically because of the QSA, or was it formed?
No, it was formed because the cities in Riverside County, especially the cities to the south of the 10, the burden of doing their projects, going through the Environmental Protection Act, going through the Endangered Species Act, and the California Endangered Species Act were lengthy when you piecemeal projects. Primarily, the overpasses on the I-10 corridor benefit right now because of the participation and the development of the MSHCP.
Okay. And you said there was a 75-year time frame. Is that over the one committee? Is that in connection with the length or time of the QSA?
Yeah. No. It's separate from the QSA. This is not a water. It has nothing to do with water. In fact, the only facilities that are covered are our energy facilities in Riverside County.
Well, that's on the energy side. But the first committee we talked about was water?
No.
Okay.
No water at all. The EIR-EIS was certified October 9th, 2007, so even the dates are different. It has nothing to do with QSA.
Thank you.
Was the group of Riverside cities that wanted a HCP to be able to protect them and be able to do their projects in a more timely manner, more organized fashion, with more certainty.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the board?
So does Edison have a seat on there also?
They are positioning to get a seat. They originally did not participate, but now they want in, and it's going to require a major amendment to the plan.
Oh.
Is it a requirement for a board member, or can we assign it to staff?
Unfortunately, it is a requirement of a board member. Only elected officials are allowed on the commission.
Well, I guess then Director Desert's making trips to Palm Desert.
Again,
I second that.
Again, I have set up the opportunity to teleconference. Like, if it was action,
We've seen you at your office.
Yeah, if it was action today, I would. There's a meeting on Thursday that's already been advertised and posted. That the teleconference will be in my office, but
What
I
time?
cannot vote. So I will listen in and participate the best I can. But I'm available to whoever's placed on this commission to assist you through the agenda and everything like that. I've been the only staffer involved in this plan and our participation in this plan.
What time is that meeting Thursday?
It's at 11 if anyone would like to join me.
I'd be delighted to serve as your alternate if no other board member.
Thank you.
Volunteers.
Okay. Any other questions from the board?
Thank you, Dee.
Comments from the audience? Okay, we'll move on to information item 5, review of amendment number 3 to service agreement number 81-1528 with consultant David Nahai for professional advisory services. It's page 46 of the agenda. Mr. Kelly will be presenting.
Yes, President Minville, members of the board. Mr. Nahai, while he is an attorney, has not served in that capacity under this service agreement. He specifically consulted with the general manager's office and with your board, with a past board, on energy matters unique to the state of California. And if you were to extend this service agreement through amendment number 3, it would bring the total value above the $200,000 threshold, which is why it's appearing on this agenda, and why I'm recommending that you do extend it when it comes back as action on the 22nd. Mr. Nahai is anxious to meet with your board. He has met in open and closed with the past board, and I believe that he's provided great value to the IID in the time that we've had him engaged in this way.
So once again, it's before us because it's broken that $200,000 threshold. It isn't that the annual contract fee is going to be over $200,000. It's just that we've renewed the contract that many times.
No, that's exactly right. He bills at a rate of $10,000 a month, and he was especially helpful to IID with the California Public Utilities Commission and the direct intervention by its president, Mr. Peavy, on behalf of the 150 megawatt solar gen project.
Okay. Any questions from the board?
I know he has a very strong public relations background, and I think most of his work's been with the public utility, so I would expect him to be strong in supporting a public utility position.
He, as you know, he's a former a general manager of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. He's now in the private sector, and his consulting practice is fairly extensive. But he is he's decidedly pro public power, and while he moves in and out of the investor-owned utility sector, he is especially strong in the public power area.
I notice on the agreement that the contract asks for a commercial liability waiver. You have a staff member that can fill us in what that covers, or?
Do you know what that is? It has come up before. Do you know, Ms. Goodsell, what that is? I'll have to find out for you.
Okay. Typically waive CGL coverage for individual persons. It's not necessary to come over a single source.
That doesn't put any additional liability on the IID by doing that, does it?
It depends on the nature of the service. If the service of an intellectual nature like this, it's not really.
I'm assuming not.
Comments from the audience? Okay, we'll move on to Information item number 6, this is a review of amendment number 4 to service agreement number 81-1087 with consultant Jay Malinowski for public relations services. Jennifer Goodsell presenting today.
Good afternoon, President Desert, members of the board, Jennifer Goodsell, General Manager's Office. In your agenda packet before you, you will find a request for service agreement amendment in the amount of $48,000 for Jay Malinowski. The district currently pays Mr. Malinowski $4,000 a month to monitor the meetings of the Southern California water agencies. He reports the actions and discussions of those meetings, and if requested by staff, he also will monitor and report the relevant actions of the water agencies, legislative and regulatory bodies of the basin states. He currently provides a written monthly report to staff on his activities, and IID is currently his only client. He's represented IID, as far as I can tell, since 2004, and we are requesting to continue his contract. In the event it's approved by the board at the next meeting, it would be the 4th Amendment.
Thank you, Jennifer. Questions or comments from the board?
Personally, I would prefer that we use somebody locally. I think we have current, former employees, board members, locals that could fill this bill. I've seen some of his work, and he does send us some interesting material. But I'm not sure that it's any more revealing than what we can pick up off the web page. So I would. That's just my position. I'm sure that.
My question is his deliverables. What does he deliver and how often?
At least on a monthly basis, sometimes 2 months. It depends how often. For example, Metropolitan Water District meets. He'll provide us with previews of those meetings. He'll attend those meetings. He'll provide commentary based upon the discussions that occurred during those meetings and the information that was provided or the presentations that were given. And he
does it all for $4,000 a month?
Yes, he does.
But he lives in Utah, right?
Yes.
Based on that?
Yes, he is.
He was a long-time former employee of MWD, and so he does the general board meetings, and he does cover some of their subcommittee meetings, especially the legal. But lest anyone think that this is, us spying on Metropolitan, this is in the interests of mutual areas of concern, and it's the kind of intelligence that, while I think it's a fair criticism that it might not go, to the depth of analysis that you'd get from a real spy,
like they do us.
It has proved to be beneficial.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. If what this entails is obviously following these meetings, which are probably done via telecom, I don't know the number of hours. I don't think, isn't there anyone in the staff that can be assigned this work? And I'm not concerned about intelligence. I think people know enough already. We don't, but they do. And I just, this would be, it doesn't seem necessary. There are no recommendations. It's simply be present and report. And I think we definitely have the intellect to do that within the House.
Okay.
I've appreciate Mr. Malinowski's reports. They're written very well. They're short. They're concise. Easy to get a hold of and grasp, and it provides a historical document that we can go back and reference. That said, it appears that it could be done by someone in staff, but until we're that mature or we have that staffing where this can be done, I'm not looking forward to getting away from Mr. Malinowski on this. This information and these reports about Metropolitan come from him. They're in addition to the reports and information that's supplied to some board members from some farmers and other farming groups out there, and it's very beneficial information. I cannot tell you how helpful Mr. Malinowski's report and the private sector farmers that have submitted information about MET and the Minute 319 activities. It also, not only is it helpful, but it's confirmation when you get the same kind of information from two separate sources when we're dealing with such a large agency as the Metropolitan Water District and their prowess and presence. Just the name and their websites are huge, and the number of meetings they have, and their contacts and connections in the legislature and the bureaus. So I'm very appreciative of his work, but we'll discuss it further as it comes back for action. Any other comments from the public? Mr. Morgan?
I think I tend to agree with Norma and Mr. Hanks. A couple questions out of Met's meeting last week, which we attended via telephone, which I think Antonio's department could do wonderfully. They talked about there's already an agreement that you reduced your water deliveries this year by 17,000 feet, which was payback for, I think, 09 or 010 when we were short of fallowing and transferred the water to San Diego. Now, if he's doing his job, you've had that report today, because I don't think we've ever seen it discussed in closed session that we've made an agreement to do that. The other thing on the Met board, which could come to you timely from internally, is that this week there's a telephone conference between all the water agencies on solving the deficiencies of the QSA and the Salton Sea. I don't sense or have seen that that's ever come before this board, and I don't know, I hope one of you guys are in that conference, one or two of you. But those are things, if you had it in-house, you'd have in your hands today, like I have, just by telephonically listening to their meetings and subcommittee meetings, listening. They have beautiful bullet points. They're a very transparent organization. So I would encourage you to keep it in-house so it's not filtered when it gets to you.
The reports that we received from Jay, is that the extent of the reports, or does he send some to staff?
No, you receive what we get.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions from the board, the audience? Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
This takes us to item 7, which has been pulled, the local entity organization structure. We'll come back and address that at our next meeting at request of Director Kuhn. Next item is item 8. Are we able to move forward on this?
She has soldiered on and is attending the meeting, but I do think we'd be better off if we rescheduled.
Okay. We'll reschedule item 8, report discussion on water department legal expenditures for 2012 to the following board meeting. This takes us to item 9, information item 9, water department general matters. We have 3 headings here under item A, water conservation issues, including paybacks of overruns, fallowing on farm, and system conservation contracts. Item B, framework of apportionment, and item C, discussion on committee appointments from the DeMars report recommendation. Mr. Silva.
Good afternoon, President Desert and board members. You will recall at the last board meeting, I believe General Manager Kelly or myself, or maybe both of us, talked to you about the fact that we've come to a point where we have so many things going on that we feel that we have to act in a coordinated fashion. We've got starting out the on-farm water conservation. We've got system water conservation. We have the fact that we have been overrunning the last couple of years, and now we have to pay back all that overrun. And so we wanted to share with you some ideas on how we need to proceed given that situation. Wanted to start first of all with it's warming up with just some flow data, just so that we see where we're at in relation to other years, and so if you look at the information on the screen there, the top blue line is a annual. Those blue squares are the annual diversions from Imperial Dam. That's a measurement that's taken at Station 60 on the All-American Canal, which is about a mile downstream of the heading. So you can see over the last, since 1990, the amount of water that we've taken, and that's goes from a high of about 3.25 million down to about 2.75. So you see that in 2009, 2010, our diversions were lower than it had been for a while. Then the last couple of years, they've come up quite a bit, and that difference, just as a way to get a perspective, from 2009 to 2012, for instance, is about 350,000 acre feet. That's that difference there. Again, that measurement is taken on a daily basis, and it's about plus or minus 2% accuracy. It's verified by the USGS, the Bureau of Reclamation. So that's a pretty good number up there. The red line below that is what we deliver to our users. And that number is not quite so accurate because we take that from our data on our system, and it's not that our measurements are that bad. It's just that the information that we get sometimes is not very accurate. For instance, when somebody shuts off early and our Sanjero gets there in the morning and he notices that the gate is shut, he doesn't really know sometimes when it was shut off, and so the number that he writes down as a delivered to user may not be correct, but it's still consistent, so it's still a good number. The only thing I wanted to point out here is that if you look at the difference between those two numbers, say in the year 2000, you could see where the, oops, went back. Trying to find the laser pointer, but can you go back to, which one is it? There you go. If you go back, I'm sorry, I went forward instead of. If you look at the difference between, let's say in the year 2000, between the delivered to users and what we received at the dam, basically, and you look over here, the difference is gotten smaller. That represents basically the improvements in our delivery system. The biggest difference being the lining of the All-American Canal. In other words, it takes less water diverted to deliver to the users. And this gap here has gotten smaller, which means that we are conserving the water, for instance, at the lining of the canal. So that's good to see. The next number that we measure is the amount of drainage going into the Salton Sea. That number is derived from measurements at the outlet of the New and Alamo rivers, and then all of the drains that enter directly into the sea. And that number is pretty accurate as well. The two measurements at the rivers are also verified by the USGS. That number is, for instance, in this year includes water that we got from rainstorms. It includes our spills, in other words, main canal, lateral canal spills, tailwater, cities returning water, anything that enters the drainage system. Let me back up. This number at the last Water Conservation Advisory Board meeting was incorrect. We had a screw up where this number was actually showed that it was less. We had a problem with the results coming out of our computer system, and so we went back and they had it corrected. They had to reprogram some stuff, so it's slightly higher than it was a year ago. But you can see that if you just look over time, this chart of the drainage to the sea does kind of follow when we drops down, but not as much, and it's stayed pretty constant. But the last couple of years, we do have more drainage than we appear to have in other years for the same amount of difference in delivered to users. For instance, if you look at this period here, this increase is quite a bit more than this one, and you look at the difference there versus this difference, this is a little bit more. The only other measurement that we have that's included within this measurement is our spills from our main canals and lateral spills, and you can see that that has gone up some. And that increase, you can't hardly see it here in this scale, but it amounts to about 34,000 acre feet between this point in 2009 and in 2012. So we are spilling more into, the IID is spilling more into the drains. This difference between, for instance, this point and this point is about 180,000. So we're putting in about 180,000 acre feet into the sea in 2012 versus 2009. So really that's about only places or the only information that we have that's pretty good measurement that we can look back and see what's going on. So when we look at, well, why are we having more spill or more drainage into the sea than we would have had before? The only the biggest difference that we find is that the use of the 12-hour runs has gone up dramatically in the last few years. If I can go to the next one. If you look at this chart, it starts in 1993 and it goes to 2012. It's hard to read the numbers, but the number for last year was 47,000. We're at 51,767 for last year. And if you look just for the last 5 years or so, it's been a dramatic increase. And we're to the point now where those number of 51,000 or so 12-hour runs represent about 10% of our total flow that's delivered to the users. And what's happening is that we cannot handle that amount of water in the system in the afternoons when we go from the day runs into 12. In other words, most of the runs that are 12 hours are in the daytime. In any of the, I think the largest in one day was 800 CFS, and it's pretty hard to take that water back and actually being able to put it in a reservoir or put it to use. So we definitely are having problems with being able to handle that water and conserving it. We started to do a study to determine whether we actually are conserving water or not with that. It doesn't appear to me that we are. And the only other thing that's increasing is this is also a chart of just looking at the combine of the 10 top crops in acreage, and you can see that we are trending up on acreage, so it makes sense that we are using more water. Also, if you recall, this last fall it was pretty warm, and the markets are good, and so guys are irrigating, for instance, the forage crops later on in the season. And so I think all these numbers to me make sense. The important part, I think, to me is that we need to start looking at the fact that we are, the last 2 years, overran our entitlement, and what are we going to do about it. So if I can have, excuse me, Tina is going to talk about overrun, the history and how we got into that and where we want to go from now on. Is there any questions?
Yeah, Jesse,
President?
before we go to see Tina, can you share with us a little bit more as to what got the attention at the WCAB on the presentation on the inaccuracies of the report that you mentioned earlier? I believe it was the water that was billed or delivered was under where we were a year ago.
Yeah, it didn't make sense because, well, I wasn't there, so maybe Al Killing, I know, was there, but my understanding was that number, the second line from the top, the delivered to users numbers showed that we were less than last year, and yet we're showing that we overran more this year than last year. So that number didn't make sense, and so, but there was an issue with that. It showed, I think, I don't remember what the number originally was, but say 10,000 acre feet less than last year. Now it's about 20,000 more than last year. It's still I mean, not that much different, but at least to me, it makes sense now. And I think that was the only issue that came up. But other than that, I'm not sure.
I think what was of concern also was that the graphs that were submitted along with that report at the last WCAB showed an increase in flows to the Alamo and the New River.
Yeah, it does show, again, if you look at this number from here to here, it doesn't follow the flatness of this one. So definitely between this last year and this year, or excuse me, 11 and 12, our total to the sea has gone up without an increase in the delivered to users. That is, I mean, that shows up there, yeah. And that's what I'm saying. I think our spills have gone up 30,000. And I think that we are spilling more, I mean, it's obvious from the numbers that we are spilling more water in it. And so we're trying to find, well, why is that happening? The biggest issue to me was our 12-hour runs are just increasing so much that we just can't handle the water that's being returned to us.
Is there a way on that chart or on a separate chart to just show since a QSA where the water has been used in our system and then transferred? Because that affects our total use, right? We're not over what we draw off the river. Some of it's being diverted up north, and I think it'd be helpful at the WCAB meeting on Thursday.
Yeah, we can break down those numbers more. I was just trying to, just show kind of an overall basis.
And then looking forward, where that trend is going to go.
Yeah, because excuse me, we can do that, and at the WCAB this meeting this Thursday, we'll have a little bit more breakdown to talk about as well.
I think there was also a comment or discussion about carryovers, that the IID had done a substantial better job of delivering the water as far as not having so many carryovers. And that also painted an interesting question as to if the IID was actually gaining something by doing that, or if we had just pumped our canals hydraulically full and had more pass-through that eventually ended up in runoff or spill.
The only reason we're able to do or to reduce the carryovers is because of that new reservoir at the Brock Reservoir. It's available to us as there's water in it, and so we are able to reduce the carryovers, but that shouldn't have any effect on water use or spill. I really can't find any connection there, but. We have Merlin Kidwell here, and I think we can, if you want him to address that, we have with him, and we can't find any connection to that. Now, if it was happening that we were trying to get it from the river, then I think it would be a problem because we would have to spill more to accomplish that.
So originally we weren't looking or anticipating any kind of a benefit to our IID water system. In fact, we had a loss of hydro power generated on our power side. But now we're experiencing a benefit with the Brock Reservoir as far as our deliveries.
Jesse, I think it would be helpful to hear from Mr. Kidwell. I know that he
can tell you.
He's got to be very excited about that. But I did speak with him and to Mr. Silva this week. I think the original problem or the confusion that resulted from that WCAB meeting was the unfortunate term of water sales. In truth, it was an operational number that there was not only an error, but as with all of these operational numbers, they're subject to a truing up period because we're constantly updating them. And Merlin, could you just talk about the regulating part of that Brock Reservoir and its relationship to carryovers?
You bet. You make one little 100,000 acre foot mistake and you get to come out. Anyway, the Brock Reservoir, as you're aware, has a capacity of about 8,000 acre foot of water, and it sits at drop 2 on the All-American. And the Bureau uses that reservoir, to store any excess that might come down the river. And we've been able to, because we have that reservoir, and because we can be aggressive in the way that we order water and not have to worry about it flowing to Mexico because it can just go in the reservoir and we can pick it up the next day or so. So we've been very aggressive at running as low a carryover rate as we can because the Brock Reservoir is there and it's full. We can take the water, and if we order too much, it can go into the reservoir. So my philosophy was that when our farmers order the water, they ordered it because they wanted it on that day, and so we try to give them the water on that day. Before the Brock Reservoir, it wouldn't be uncommon to have to carry over 30% of the orders to be able to. Carryovers are just used for the short-term balance. I only have so much coming, so I have to carry water over so I can balance the system so it won't run short. So in that regard, we've been able to reduce the carryover rate to a minimal amount because we can basically try to run everything on every day as much as we can, and that's our goal.
And Merlin, do you have some sort of working theory about how why we're running so high in the two rivers?
Well, I know from I just mainly I work in the main canals, and I know in the main canals that we are receiving. Jesse mentioned it was 800 CFS back in just 12 hours, but when you take other water back from water being reduced in other areas, it can easily go over 1,000 CFS a day during the peak 12-hour season. And that's 1,000 CFS that has to be backed all the way back to drop one or put into a reservoir. And the reservoirs really fill up fast during this time of year because you can only pull a limited amount out because of the orders. And so the reason why the reservoirs fill up, and the reason why we have more main canal spill is because I can't control the 12-hour water that's coming back to me. And so I would place that, the relationship between the increase in 12-hour runs to the increase in flow to the rivers. But I don't know that for sure. Yeah. Any other questions?
I know it's come up in the system conservation plan, but the inline reservoirs, more of them, the ability to get interceptors included in the system. We talked with you at the water control about that and the likelihood of some areas versus others to put those. How well have those been addressed to kind of handle some of this just water reuse situation within the system? Once it's already been ordered, it's in a canal going to field, the farmer cuts the gate, and it continues down the system. How is most of that recapturing of water being addressed in the system conservation, or is it just right now it's just a series of checks and balances on our measuring devices, SCADA, things like that?
I would have to defer to Jesse on that. He's much more authority on the system conservation plan than I am.
Okay. What would you need in order to balance it? I guess directed to you since you're the one balancing the main lines.
Well, in the system conservation plan, there's a lot more emphasis given to the Zanharrow and control a more local area, the way I understand it. More control of his headings, more control so he can see the spills. And also, that was the ideal of smaller inline reservoirs to allow him to control that water so he can hold it and reduce his head and pull off of it. Right. It asks a lot of our Zanharrows, and it's a big change. Well, an interceptor system that collects it and reuses it would be, it's a system we have experience with now. These small inline reservoirs we don't have, at least I don't have the experience with.
Not the local control of it.
Right, and besides that's taking it, and actually it should be the Zanharrows. The Zanharrows are the main workforce in here that have to control this water. And so if it's a tool that they can use, then that would have value. Okay. But if it was anything, you have to, the cost versus the benefit. I don't know.
So Merlin, on this report, this correction, the last report said that we were some 65,000 acre feet behind in water sales.
That's correct. That's what my report showed.
The new report shows that our water sales are
18,000 acre feet over.
Over where we were a year ago?
18,000 acre feet over, yes. Basically, the 2 years, 2011, 2012, end up being almost identical. The difference being very minor as when you talk numbers that big.
And being over in the sales of by 18,000 acre feet, that would go along with the understanding that we are even higher in our overrun this year than we were a year ago, our overuse.
Yes, in relation, and Tina can answer that question much better than I do, but that overrun also because we have less water to use this year than we did the year before. So even though we sold the same amount of water, and we actually took, and it looks like we'll take less water at Station 60, the amount that we had to sell was less. And so, and thus, instead of 100 and, so the number is 150,000 over versus if we had the same water as the year before, it would be a lot less.
Where's Station 60?
It's at Imperial Dam. Basically, when you say at Imperial Dam, it's 60 feet?
6,000 feet.
6,000 feet, yeah. 6,000 feet below the head gates. You can't measure the head gates, so they have a measuring station below the desilting basins where they measure all the flows, not just the IID's flow, but the Coachola's flow. I mean, they measure the basic flow, and then they have to break down what each agency takes.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions? Should Tina come up now, or do we?
Yeah, thanks, Merlin.
You bet.
Just let me, Steve, you asked a couple of questions on when Merlin mentioned that he can't handle the 12-hour runs. The biggest thing I noticed was at the trifolium spill, which is just upstream of trifolium extension spill, just upstream of Carter Reservoir. When we put the Carter Reservoir in, that spill basically went to zero. Now it's back up to 3,400 acre feet this last year, which means that that's. We were conserving about that much to begin with. So now, because of additional flexibility with 12-hour runs, that reservoir really is just like if it wasn't there. We're spilling more than 3,000 acre feet at that location. So obviously, we have to put in another reservoir, and that's one of the first things we're talking about doing on the system conservation upstream at that point, about lateral 13, somewhere in there.
I mean, I guess if you have specific areas identified, it'd be helpful to go to those farmers and work as a group for that local farmer. If they can't get together and manage the way they work their water, then, I mean, that would be step one. Step two would be talk to all farmers and address the 12-hour watering standard. But
well, one of the things, again, that we're doing in this process, hopefully, is that on the system conservation, there's some things that are pretty obvious. Other things about, for instance, the inline reservoirs, well, is that the best way to do it or not? I think we still want to kick that around a little bit with the Water Conservation Advisory Board and then have talked to the guys locally and see, kind of what makes the most sense, because I'm not sure that that's exactly what we want to do. We want to still visit that. But there's some other things, like this reservoir on the west side Main, some of the connecting some existing spills to other canals that go into reservoirs, those are pretty obvious. I think that we can go ahead with. But the other question about inline reservoirs and having the San Hurlos have all the control, not that it's not good in itself, but it may not be the best way to eliminate spill. So again, we need to have more discussions on that. Any other questions, Matt?
Tina?
Hi, I'm Tina Shields, Colorado River Resources Manager. I was going to do a little background that we've touched on just to better explain some of the overuse issues the last couple of years. This is a chart that shows since the QSA implementation, which is when IID basically agreed to a 3.1 million acre foot cap, what those annual occurrences of overruns versus underuse situations. So here you can see the dark blue lines when it's above the bottom bar are overruns, and below the negative bracketed numbers are years in which we used below the total annual limitation on us. The faded blue number in the background is the water use that year, so you can kind of see the magnitude of what we use. They're large numbers, but when you start comparing 50 and 100,000 acre feet overruns and underruns to the 3 million, they pale in comparison, even though they are significant. One of the interesting things to note is that through this process, IID did cap itself. The underuse years, that water flows either to a junior priority holder who can divert it, and if they choose not to divert it or if they're unable to divert it, it remains in the Colorado River system to benefit all users. Accounting's done on a calendar year basis, so on December 31st, you turn into a pumpkin, all the charts are cleared, and you start over again from scratch. The pie chart on the right shows cumulatively during this time period the context of IID's average use. Everybody likes to focus on the overrun years when it's occurring, the underuse when it's occurring, but if you look long term, you can see that at least through this most recent period, the underuse has been far and above the overuse. The 2012 number is going to be probably in the neighborhood of 150,000 acre feet, so that will change the balance of that pie chart, but you can see just the general circumstances. In 2011, IID's overrun at the end of the calendar year was approximately 93,000 acre feet. It was reduced based on some water excess conservation that would have gone to intentionally created surplus. One of the rules of the intentionally created surplus program is you cannot bank water when you're in an overrun situation, so that water gets applied as conservation towards that overrun. The end of year balance was then 82,000 acre feet. You can see from the formula there that in a 3-year payback period, there's a little bit of a formulaic calculation as to what that payback schedule is, and there's a minimum payback. The minimum payback being 20% of your overrun account, or 1/3 of that overrun. So we basically got triggered into a minimum threshold payback of 62,000 acre feet, which will occur this year, and then the balance of that overrun occurs in 2014. This is a very similar chart. I've added in the 2012 number, and again, it lets you see on a different scale the magnitude of the overruns and the underruns. But what this does is if we look at the 212 situation, we have a little different context. The way the payback rules are applied is depending on the elevation of Lake Mead. Overruns can be accelerated in their payback, and at a certain elevation point, the overrun policy is suspended because of the likelihood of shortages to other parties. This calendar year, as of January 1st, I don't have the number, but I have the December 31st number, was 1120.27. That is below the 1125 threshold for a 3-year payback, so it commences a 1-year payback. So whatever overrun is finalized for 2012 will be due in full in the 2014 calendar year. So if you take the existing payback obligation for this year, then move forward to 2014, you can see 2014 has a significant payback obligation for IID. The numbers aren't finalized, but I wouldn't expect them to vary significantly from this. And so you can see that's a big concern for IID. We have our normal transfer scheduled obligations. This is a payback obligation that has no revenue source associated with it, so it can be very expensive.
What is the elevation of the lake? What is 1 foot equal to an acre feet? Do you know? How many acres is the lake?
I have no idea. I'll have to get back. Lake trivia, not familiar with right now.
I thought Met had a bunch stored back there, but they don't.
Most agencies have, not most agencies, Met has, I want to say, 400,000 or 500,000 acre feet stored. It may even be higher. I'd have to look at the most recent. We have a small volume in there, I think about 6,000 acre feet. It will be eliminated this year to go towards the 2013 payback. Essentially, the storage we have right now is our flexibility when we overcreate conservation water, provided it falls within the appropriate categories. Otherwise, you would lose it. So we do have the ability to store water up to 25,000 acre feet a year if it's conserved via fallowing pump back systems or our main canal seepage interception program. So we're using that as our flexibility tool so we don't lose any excess conservation right now. Paybacks have that same advantage. It's not good to have, but to the extent you owe a debt, when you overcreate water, you have a place to put that water and you don't end up in a circumstance where you lose that water. So what this brings into play, you'll see in the board agenda, there was kind of a bunch of background information on how IID can, moving forward, look to manage its overruns and manage this 3.1 million acre foot cap. What we're looking at, just from a timing standpoint, is the aqua distribution plan that is currently adopted by the board. The difficulty with that is it has a trigger mechanism to turn it on. And the way that that has always been done in the past is a forecasting tool. So you would do a probability analysis of supply and demand and say, what do we think next year is going to look like? But the probability tool we've been using looks back in time. So you're always catching up, and essentially you're behind the scale unless you have more trending that occurs. With the more recent ag markets being strong the last couple of years, we went from underruns in the neighborhood of 200,000 acre feet for consecutive years to flip overrun status now. And so the predictability tool wasn't providing the necessary mechanism for the board to make decisions. And so what we're looking at here is, with the board's direction, moving forward into essentially eliminating that on-off trigger provision for the aqua distribution and having it be on all the time. We also outlined, I think there's 10, and there could possibly be some more that we haven't thought of yet, different tools that could be considered for modification. The complexity right now is looking in the near term, what can we do in the next couple of months to turn on the existing program we have and implement it, and then see what modifications need to be made. I can run through these really quickly. One of the first things you would look at is you may get in a circumstance where you don't have high water use years and you'd want a mechanism to turn it off. Right now we turn it on, but the more practical way to manage your water is to have an apportionment full-time. Each year you would figure out what your number would be and provide that to your water users. And then midway through the year or at different stages through that year, you could do an assessment and say, geez, it looks like the water use conditions are significantly lower than us meeting that threshold of triggering an overrun, so maybe we could suspend it. And if the water use was tracking higher than normal, you would continue to keep that in place. Again, these are just tools that would be up for consideration and brainstorming. There's probably others that we don't have on this list. You could have provisions such as a mini overrun policy. IID has the ability to exceed its annual entitlement by 10%. One of the downsides of an apportionment is, with a strict limit on an annual basis over time, if water users are going to manage to that number, they're always going to go on the bottom side to be conservative, and your long-term use will trend downward. Well, we want to fully utilize that 3.1 million acre feet as much as we can, and there may be circumstances, if water users are willing to agree to pay back obligations, that they would be allowed to use supplemental supplies. And then at the end of the year, when you add the water up, if you're not in an overrun, those are waived. But if you're in an overrun, the users that exceeded their allotted uses would be responsible for those payback obligations or part of that payback process. You could look at different procedures that would manage your water bank to ensure that the trading was working properly and that people weren't hoarding water or people weren't letting water go that they needed later on and then not having a mechanism to get them back. And these are all procedures that we would need water user input to design and probably would adapt over time based on the implementation efforts. These tools here talk about an advisory board, which I think is probably first and foremost into anything that's being done, looking into the administration of that water bank and how it's best managed. We would also want to consider whether the apportionment tools would be tools that would be used to meet these payback obligations and other management opportunities. Some of the suggestions that we had received from other water users were means to tie in the implementation of certain best management practices in order to receive these supplies or to use the banking mechanism. There's a few more here. Most of these talk about under what conditions you would revoke apportionments. People were delinquent in their bills, or lands that historically would have a right to receive water, but there's not currently infrastructure there. There are ID-owned lands that you might have some different policy decisions on how to manage those lands, or you might say, no, we're going to go ahead and treat them as all the others. It's just a matter of what tools you want to use. So what we're looking at here for next steps is really thinking of this as an adaptive management program. We've not implemented formally the aqua distribution. It's been adopted. It's been on the books. There was a pilot year, and it was then rescinded. So we've never had the opportunity for the water users nor staff to implement the different procedures in place, to test out the software, to see how it works, and to make corrections as necessary. We're recommending and asking for board direction on establishing a near-term advisory committee. One of Mr. DeMar's recommendations, he had a series of 5 different committees that was adopted in the resolutions the board supported last year. Right now, we're looking on focusing on the more immediate actions, which would be the implementation of the conservation programs, as well as refining this apportionment program and making that work. And then through that same subgroup, looking at some community advisory and outreach efforts to help communicate what's going on better. So we would really appreciate board direction at this time as far as the formation of that committee, and if these are steps you are interested in pursuing.
Okay, well, thank you, Tina. This is quite a long presentation, and many different areas have been addressed. I think we have some questions or comments from the public. They've been waiting. Let's hear what they have to
I'd like
say.
Before they get started, could I ask a couple questions?
Sure.
I think it'd be helpful. On number 6 on page 11, from there on, everything kind of goes south for me. It would have all the indications that the overuse is a grower issue, grower problem. And so we're gonna put all these provisions in there to tighten it up on them before we take a look at all the causes that created an overrun. If you go to, well, first of all, I don't think we ever had an overrun before a QSA.
Wasn't possible to have an overrun because we had no limit.
Okay, so right off the bat, it makes you wonder, well, are the farmers causing the overrun? Okay. If you go to page 5, and this was very helpful, particularly at our conference water conference in Vegas. You have the graph over to the right. You have the cumulative annual overruns underuse. So during the time frame that we're talking about from the signing of the QSA into 2011, there was 819,000 acre feet, almost 820,000 acre feet that went to the junior water rights holder. And that's the way it works. You know, we understand that. But the minute we have 104,000, as you show here on the graph, all of a sudden, all these agencies get all up in the air, you know. And I received information yesterday that said there's a provision in the QSA that if we don't meet our transfer benchmarks, that we could lose the overrun provision from the feds. So, you know, when you look at this, and I admire the staff with all the data you guys come up with and the ideas you have looking at this problem, but sometimes you overlook some little minor things like right here, this graph. This graph really pinpoints the problem, and it's a problem that the board, since I've been here, have talked about for 6 years. That 819,000 acre feet, even though it can go to the junior water rights, it could also be stored. And we had a storage provision in place, which we never needed before because you couldn't have an overrun. We had plenty of water, in other words, you know. So if we had sufficient storage, and people say, well, where are you going to store it? Are you going to store it in the ground? Or are you going to store it elsewhere? Well, you know, when this thing was negotiated, this was a term that was grossly overlooked by our negotiators. You know, we're the ones giving up everything. And we should have required, at the minimum, some storage in Lake Mead. There's no need for us to have to go develop a big storage unit out in the desert or anywhere else. I mean, we may have to now, but you know, when you're sitting at a table and they're coming after you with all threats and, you know, they get you off balance with the fear factor and everything, and these things tend to get overlooked. But the truth of the matter is, if we manage that little graft, if we had some way to manage that, we wouldn't have this issue. So now we're looking at this next year pulling out of our conservation revenues up to maybe $20 million bucks, roughly, to create water to pay back for overruns. And it's because we sent our water earlier. You know, so when we're looking at a solution, we're looking short term, how we pay this back, how we get the monkey off our back, and all these other water agencies. The 319, there was two of us that said, you know what, we need storage. We have to have storage. Somehow we have to have the leverage to get storage. They're still interested in the 319. They still need us to participate. And it's going to create even more problems with that 319 with the capacity. If Mexico uses part of it, the city of San Diego owns, my understanding, 200,000 acre-feet of capacity. The lining of the All-American, when they put in the safety measures, downsize the capacity. So that's going to catch us and other problems. So there is some leverage. We just have to take care of it. We have to get attorneys in here that are looking after our interests, not just how to get the water over to San Diego. I know they need it over there, and I know that's the objective. But doggone, we're the ones that's eating the dust. We're the ones getting left behind. And you got Lake Mead sitting up there, and they need water there to service Vegas out of it, at least just the elevation level. They're all prospering from the generation off of our water, which we're getting none of it. I mean, at some point in time, we have to sit down and say, okay, you know, we have these issues. You need the water going. You got the issue with the Salton Sea. There's going to be other leverage points for us, but we have to understand what is it that we need most. I don't know of anything. You know, they talk about all these conservation measures and everything. That's important, you know, to satisfy their need. But to satisfy our need, it's storage. And we have to look at that. At some point in time, that's got to become our focal point. Then everything else works. It works for the other water agencies. You know, Met will probably have a problem with this, you know.
We'll send you a link.
But, you know, they're sitting back, and they'd like for this thing to, you know, take a little different turn on us. But that's, you know, even though we take our shots at them, you got to give them credit. They do take care of their agency. And we expect to do the same here. And so, you know, while we're looking at all this, right there's the answer. There's 819,000 acre feet that could have been used for overruns. And it may not be that hard to renegotiate or reform the QSA, but it's not going to happen unless we can force it to the table.
So Director Hanks, just on that point, because I mean, all of you that went to the Colorado River Water Users Conference, I mean, you saw that there's this tension, upper basin, lower basin, about IID's use of water, and you're right. As Mead goes down, the Mexican apportionment, they want it there to improve the elevation, but they don't want IID storing, for the same good purpose.
Well, we were all...
Be the IED storing, it'd be Met storing the junior right holders water, right? So
No, it would be IID getting what it doesn't have now, which is storage.
But that's still our water. We have the right to...
Well,
is reasonable beneficial use.
Exactly.
Yeah, add something.
Look,
Yeah,
the,
but,
the
you know-
QSA capped the IID and our water rights. Now over in Palo Verde, that was capped. Met capped those as part of their water transfer, water conservation program over there.
There was a cap imposed on all the agriculture agencies except for PVID, who claimed the senior line.
But Met's water transfer program effectively capped PVID.
That agreed to a makeshift cap of 420 for Palo Verde.
And-
If there's any overage, Met is responsible. If there's any underage, Met gets the benefit.
What General Manager Kelly and I learned at the meetings up in Las Vegas was that was done, and the way that PVID gets through that is that Met makes up for those overruns. When PVID does experience overruns, but Met makes up for them. And Met, this is enlightening here, Met makes up for those overruns by IID underuse.
That was the first time I'd heard that, so I don't know if that's an old position or a new response. But yes, they also manage their PVID fallowing program to manage that
That's smart.
over-under.
I mean, so you've got one agency that's capped up there, and they realize when they cap that they no longer have an unlimited supply. They have to realize what they're going to do and how they work out overruns. Well, they work it out through IID underuse.
That's
but the QSA capped the IID, but we have no access to any type of buffer or any type of smoothing operation to straighten us, help us out.
So that disparity is the point I was trying to make. Metropolitan sees itself as regulating, right? In the case of PVID, Metropolitan sees itself as the regulator on the river for the lower basin. But those same agencies, including Metropolitan, and extending up the river, they believe that anything we do with the Salton Sea is wasted water. So I agree with you that minute 319 ends up being an opening.
Well, I want to make this clear. Before I left to go to the Colorado River Water Board meeting, you know, I went to that conference one time before, and I got out of there because I didn't want to go to jail. You know, I mean, the comments that people were making, and you know, how dare you guys put water on alfalfa in the desert, you know, type comments, and you know. So I was expecting some of the same. What changed that was this graph that you put together, Tina.
Yeah, I heard
and
they
you
weren't
gave
real
in
fond of it.
well, your presentation. It shut them up. You know, this little graph, all of a sudden, we weren't necessarily the bad guys, you know, hoarding all the water. Gee, look here. When I brought it up at the Salton Sea meeting, you know, it was pretty well orchestrated and everything. And whenever I started talking about the sea going down because we sent all this extra water too, they didn't want to hear that. They want to shut me off. And it wasn't because the cold wind was blowing either.
We did provide this information to the Colorado River Board. There are some ongoing issues for 2012 related to the ISG benchmark schedules. Some of them are related to IID's overuse as far as meeting certain benchmarks. The others are beyond our control. They were for that C2 water that never occurred. So there's some issues regarding that and how the Bureau deals with that.
Well, I know we have this problem that we have to deal with it before we can get to storage, but you know, that needs to be a focal point, and we can start raising that right away. But I think in terms of what I heard from Director Benson, and I think I've heard it from this board and I've heard it from our general manager, we're going to have to start consulting with our water users. Ones use this water, we go to them, we have this payback, we know about how much revenue we have, how expensive it's going to be, but we're going to have to get this level. This is the thorn they're going to use to pluck our eyes out with. You know, this is going to be their focal point, but at the same time, is exactly where we need to focus too, in getting storage. So in this process, and take it to the growers. Just lay it out there. Look, this is the problem we have, And I wouldn't go to them and say, well, you created this, and on number 6, if you don't sign up for my program, and we go to apportionment, and your crop is 2 waterings away, and you've used up all your allocation, but you haven't signed up, so I guess it's going to die on the vine. We can't go that route. We have to deliver the water. We have to make sure that we have sufficient water here, and then we worry about the transfer.
Well, in fact, at that same conference, we spent a good amount of time with Mr. DeMars on how we would put together this implementation committee. And the apportionment isn't, it certainly is useful for catching up. It isn't to pay back the river or to fulfill the transfer obligations. It's so that we can account for our water.
Yeah. And if, in terms of that apportionment, without storage, I guess that's where you have to turn. But if you had storage along with the apportionment, and you had that storage you could pull out of,
right,
now you got the problem solved.
Well, we're not viewing an apportionment, an annual apportionment, as a means of generating water for payback. It may have some beneficial effect in that respect, but we see it as the responsible thing to do for all the reasons that you've seen here. We have this aggressive water payback. We have the transfer. As long as there is a transfer, we've got those milestones we have to meet. And we've got the scrutiny of this river community. Our goal is to serve our water users. And we can't do it without their help. So this implementation committee that you'll sanction is going to have to come up with an apportionment, and ideally that would occur in April. Now, I'm told that a more realistic effective date is mid-year, but I think the sooner the better, and we're going to have their help to do it.
Yeah, it's not going to be an easy thing. If you put a committee all of growers in there, it's going to still have its problems. It's not an easy solution.
Well, the water bank itself, we know just from our prior experience with the equitable distribution. We could spend a year arguing about that. So it can't be that kind of committee.
Tina, on your next steps, just 2 quick things. You have near-term advisory committee. I think that committee exists through the WCAB, and I personally would like to see that used if it's not the right setup or function. If it's an in-house committee where we work internally, great, but I think we need to go to the farmers who are using the water, the majority of it, and ask them what their ideas are. If we get their buy-in, then they're more likely to use it and follow it. And I know there's a Farm Bureau meeting next week. I'd like similar discussion to happen there in their water committee, which we attended, was it last month?
Right. We had talked with Mr. DeMars based on the resolution you adopted, and he's going to facilitate that committee process. We were hoping to have a couple board members, some number of WCAB members, maybe from Farm Bureau and other organizations. The key would be to have a manageable group, because then you're going to have to make decisions and move forward in this compressed time frame. And then we'll also bring in staff that can advise as to how long it would take to implement different changes, what's realistic in the short term, what we need to do now, but we can work towards in the future,
right,
and the cost associated with those changes.
And speaking on DeMars, I'd hope that he would be on this agenda, but I think he's planning on coming in January. I don't know what his schedule is, but I'd like to see him at the next meeting to kick this off and really get going.
At some point in time, we're because of the Brown Act issues of board members going to WCAB and so forth. I like to go to those meetings, but when I walk in there and I see 2 other board members, I get nervous, But at some point in time, we need to have some joint meetings, so that we all are up to speed on this and hear their concerns and so forth.
So we will be there Thursday as staff, and one of the things we'll discuss with them is how your board interacts with them.
If I may, I think two things are very much in line. One is an immediate list of priorities, and number two, a realistic timeline. It's been my experience that so many things end up being open-ended. And if we don't have a timeline, then we can't hold anyone accountable. And we are not in a predicament. That's why we keep just working on putting out the fires. We're just too busy stomping, and we can't see what's around the corner. So I think both of these are just crucial, but the timeline and who's responsible for what really needs to guide the entire process. If I may make this as a suggestion, please.
These are not in any particular order. Don't think just because there's one that should be first priority. They're really sort of a brainstorm. There's probably other things that we need to add to the list, and some of these can be removed if they're not appropriate. But the intent was to start to have something to throw bombs at when you start the discussion and facilitate that effort.
If I remember right, wasn't it Attorney Solmack that told us that we have an allocation method? It's called as needed.
He said that we already allocate according to need.
Yeah.
It's just not working out too well this year.
Yeah, but there's some answers there. There's long-term answers and short-term, and we've got our back to the wall.
And I think just not to beat a dead horse to the ground, but a lot of this information is already available. And it seems like people get up and they give us information and then that's it. We need the help with the solutions. If not, then we're going to have to come up with them. But we get up, we get this information, and then it's there. So what are we going to do about these things, and when are we going to do them, and who is going to do them? I think that's what we need to bear in mind. Please.
Okay, we'll open up to discussion now from the audience. Mr. Morgan.
I hope you guys could follow that. The staff's done a tremendous job of making a simple thing very complicated and very long-winded. Everything Tina has said here today has been brought to the board of the IID via the Farm Bureau or the WCAB in the past. Everything they've tried to do as far as the allocation to water bank was offered by the private sector free. The staff happened to be, and because of your wonderful ethics training, I'm an expert at it, your out-of-town attorneys as public employees were managing the water department via emails that this board never saw. If you go to the Farm Bureau, you'll find that they addressed everything she's talked about here. They took it to the board. They thought it out. They put the burden where the burden should be. It was on the private sector because of the responsibility of using the water, and it was thrown away by staff. So go to the Farm Bureau meeting next week, get the water committee to address what they've told you. You were offered free management tools, computer systems. You've spent millions of dollars on other ones that don't work. But even more troubling than that, and I don't like to pick on Merlin, but if I understand the way the river has worked, when we ask water to be let out of Meade, when it hits Imperial Dam, if we don't want to take it, it's not charged to us. So they built Brock Reservoir. I think because Senator's Wash could not be fixed. I think what Merlin said is because we have Brock Reservoir there, we can be more aggressive on our orders out of Hoover. The problem with that is every drop that goes into Brock goes on to Nevada or San Diego, not Colorado River apportionment contract people. It's a great way to create paper water for San Diego and Nevada. And if what he said was correct and I heard it right, you've got to stop it tomorrow. You cannot take water out of those dams and create it to a person who's not a contract user because they paid for a reservoir, and now we're mismanaging it. Back as far as Mike King, we talked about how to take care of the 12-hour orders. He gave Al Kalin, he gave Jim Walker the rights to work on the Kalin Reservoir. They came up with conclusion. The staff ignored it. I mean, so you guys as board members, you're here for change. You go through the regular staff and you hear the stuff like coming out of Kevin and everyone else's mouth, you're making a humongous mistake. We're never going to be loved on the river because we have the biggest entitlement. Don't expect to ever get loved on the river unless every time they come here, you give it away. Your Prop 2 water lawyers had major reasons they didn't want you storing water. They have major clients over the coast that get the benefit of your underuse. So don't keep going through staff. They've known this for years. I've said it for years. You guys, at least the new members, are new. So take a look at what's going on here. It's all in your minutes. It's all been told to you. The staff has kept it from happening. Tina's deal on the forecasting, it was told to Dr. Eckhart years ago. It's a model they set it up wrong. You could use his apportionment deal if you want, except it's called allocation, and Kevin thinks that puts politicians in harm's way, so let's design another one. We don't have extra time. Now, again, I don't want to put words in Merlin's mouth. They've changed some numbers to where we don't have a 65,000 acre feet less sales last year. We have 18,000 more than last year. And we diverted 70,000 more feet than last year. 70,000, that's 52,000 acre feet you have to pay back at $125 a foot. It's $10 million gone. Gone. You might not even have it. So as a board, I would get to the WCAB, I would get to the Farm Bureau and ask the previous boards and the current boards what they've done in line with what Tina's saying they're now going to design. I would see if they were right over the last 5 or 6 years, and I would start taking more advice from them instead of from your agency. Thank you.
Larry Cox, Farmer Brawley. A couple things are a little frustrating. And, there were quite a few of us that were up at the Hertzberg hearings. I believe that was in 2001. And I think as a group, we stood up and told both the state and the water agencies that for the IID to have to pay back an overrun through conservation but not to get credit for an underrun was basically un-American. We told our board to not sign a contract that did not have storage and mead, or at least a 5 or 10 year rolling average on our underuse versus overuse. And I understand that the pressure on our board to sign that that agreement was measurable, and I don't know how I would have responded, but because our negotiators and our board did not heed that, we are stuck with what we are. The second thing is that when Judge Candy invalidated the QSA, our IID board appealed it. And we have a terrible deal, and it's a little frustrating for our own IID board to have appealed a contract that we are now bad-mouthing how bad a deal we've got. So that's a little frustrating. I would speak also to the operations of our own reservoirs. I think we've talked at some of the WCAB meetings about that we are using those to minimize carryovers. And, you know, we want as much water, you know, we'd like as flexible a water delivery system as we can get. But you can't privatize gains and socialize losses. And so there are those of us in the farming community who are benefiting because of the flexibility of the system, but causing these overruns. So we're going to have to re-scope our system to what is tolerable to minimize our overruns. If we need to if we need to have 20% overruns in order to keep water in the system, keep it going out of the spills, if we need to redo our reservoirs that we have in system to maybe deliver less water but store more water, that should be a priority rather than minimizing carryovers. The 12-hour, I mean, I was talking, Jimmy Walker talked to me about the Wiley Reservoir, and he said, hey, we've got too much water going out the Wiley Reservoir. And I said, because the rules are too lax. So they were, you know, I'm talking to my irrigation foreman, and I said, Rolf, I said, you know, what are you doing on our shutting off some of our orders? He said, we can shut it off 10 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock at night, 2 o'clock in the morning. He said, Larry, they let us do what we want to do. You know, that's, you know, we're taking advantage of the rules, and the rules are too lax. You know, believe me, I'm not going to be happy with some of the stuff that we have to do as a farming community to tighten up the system, but we're going to have to do it. The best thing that we could do would be pray for about 5 inches of rain. You know, I think for every inch of rain down here, they figured we use 40,000 acre feet less. So one of the other issues that we had working on WCAB, you know, there's been a couple of different subcommittees. One was working on fallowing program, one was working on farm conservation. We spent several months meeting on on-farm conservation. We get together and we have the IID legal staff says, this won't work, legal doesn't approve this. So I guess what we need, and I understand you don't want to have something that's not legally defensible, but we need some parameters on the WCAB. Hey, give us some guidelines of what's legal and let us work within those rather than us come up with something and have legal say this isn't going to work. So you've got a good group on the WCAB, but a lot of us have, you know, better things we can do with our time than to spin our wheels over there. So, you know, give us some help, give us some parameters, and let us get the job done. I think you'd be better served. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. Rusty.
Rusty Jordan Brawley. First of all, congratulations, Steve and Norma, for your election. I think you're trying to solve the problem. It isn't that no one ever warned you that there was a problem coming, or your predecessors, because I know I sat in the Farm Bureau meetings in January and February and March and April and May and June and said, you're going to run over your water. And they go, well, how do you know? Because the prices are high and everybody's going to grow things. And so now it finally arrives here. Jesse, how many of the spills are there that we don't monitor or have a measure on? A bunch? A few?
Yeah, out of the 128 or so, we actually monitor 30, and then we use formulas to project the other ones.
Okay. Does anybody like stick a stick in the mud to see if somebody runs a lot of water out one and sneaks a little bit out now and then?
Well, the other ones, we do monitor them visually, but we don't have a constant monitoring on them.
If you have increased flow to the sea, but no increased measurement of spills by your data on the chart, would that would like put a flag up for me that maybe there are spills that aren't being recorded?
No, our spill did go up compared to last year.
Yeah, but like on this chart, it's like, you know, first of all, you change, you know, the size is so large, you know, 60,000 acre feet, which is millions of dollars, is almost imperceptible. But, you know, you've got a perceptible increase in the flow to the sea, but really no perceptible increase in the spills shown by the ID.
It did go up measurably, yes.
But not, you know, not on your chart. So anyway, I was thinking that maybe somebody out there in the Sand Harrow department might be gaming it. The other thing, for a simple solution to your overruns that you could take right away would be to mandate a limit on 12-hour runs for the year. In general, the farmers are very stable. They grow the same crops every year. They grow the same acres. One guy moves 160 here or there. Take out your 12,000, we had 50,000, go back to 2008 or 9 and pass out 35,000 12-hour runs. Then you have committee for everything. You can always have the Justice Committee, and they can pass a lot 500 extras at the end of the year. And that, because if we take Jesse at his word, that a big part of the increase in the spills and the inefficiency comes from the fact that we have so many 12-hour runs, would limit that, and then you could spend year and a half while you figure out what all the other manifestations of what your program's going to be, because everything here moves at about a glacial pace, because we got to think about it all. The other thing you might consider is that I sat through the trial in Sacramento from the latest go-around in the QSA, and there's a real decent chance, that the QSA get thrown out on CEQA issues as well as on the law. On the CEQA issues, they could say you didn't do the environmental impact report correctly. You didn't consider the growth impacts to the coast. You didn't. There's 1,000 things that they have that were brought up. They can either throw out this QSA, which everybody says is important, or they can recirculate. If they recirculate, you're going to have to vote on it. It'll be just like another vote on the QSA. If you vote no, we don't accept that new CEQA, there's no QSA. Then your problem will be is you're addicted to the money. You got a whole bunch of really fine people working for you that you're not going to have the money to pay. And you've been subsidizing the water rates, and it's really pretty difficult to figure out what the really cost to deliver water. You've been subsidizing the water rates, and all of a sudden you're going to have to raise the rates 50% to pay for the delivery of the water, not even counting the extra people that you're monitoring the QSA with. And that's going to really be a big problem. And that was why I think John Pierre, actually, I agreed very much with him. He wanted to have it defined how much the QSA part was costing so you could deal with that contingency. And you guys may very well have that, because in 30 days, Judge Connolly is going to say something about the QSA. And then in a year and a half or two, the appellate court will say something, and you guys will be out in limbo. So in meantime, you might limit 12-hour water runs, or limit people the number of acre feet, or there's a bunch of brilliant people can come up with reasons, but you know, do something wrong, but do something, and do it quick, because the economy is still good. Wonderful. We can employ people. People can work. They can make money. They can buy things. All the wonderful things that are going on are going to make the demand for what you sell, water, high. And that's wonderful. But you got a problem. And God bless you. Get it done. Thanks.
Rusty, I've got a couple questions for you. Yeah.
Oh, I never get questions. That's good.
I used to ask you a lot of questions, Mr. Gonzalez's Spanish class, when I didn't know the right word.
Well, it took me 3 years to do two.
I got a question. Is it a possibility that there could be planned carryovers on certain crops that could help with the payback?
What kind of carryovers?
Just planned carryovers. Certain crops, could you carry them over an extra day? And
oh, I'm sure that you can, because it depends on your soil type and the time of the year.
But let me ask you this. Do you think there would be an interest there of the growers to explore that?
I think they can do it. I expect on the big bulk of the valley's land. Now, if you take, let's say Tom Brundy's farm sand, he's got 1.5 inches of water capacity in a foot. In June, the water consumption can be 1 inch. So he's got a day. Maybe he's using 3 or 4 feet, but he's got a day to hit water. So it's really important to him in June and May to hit on time. But if you're in the central part of the valley with Hopeville with Imperial silty clay, at 3 inches a foot, 4 feet deep, there's a foot of water. If it takes a day or two, it's not going to affect a lot. So some people are going to be really able to take a day, overruns, and other people will spend a lot of time figuring out how to make sure they get it on time.
Yeah, I understand some of them, is an impossibility. The other question I had for you, on the recirculation, I agree with what you said there. Who knows how the judges are going to rule, but recirculation is a possibility. I keep looking for that leverage at the table. Some of the parties, I think, are more willing than others to come back to the table and renegotiate, reform some of this to make it work. And there's others, I think, would just put their foot on the back of our neck and that we all go away. But whenever you said something about the appeal, Judge Candy, and so forth. If you go back and check, we did pass a resolution, and that's probably one vote I wish I had back. But the intent was to reform or renegotiate some of these issues that were in the way, and be very active in it. And that didn't happen. It just moved on to the appeal. And had we not appealed it, I think there's probably other parties that would have appealed it, in the category 1. So I don't know whether that's an issue. But when you bring up the question or the issue about being addicted to the money, that's one of the reasons why in this budget we're insisting that those things be kept separate.
I'm sorry. I'm wearing a hearing aid today because I'm in a room and I can't pick up everything you're saying. That's why I wanted.
Well, the issue you brought up about being addicted to the money.
Right.
We have some people that believe that we're totally dependent on it. We'll go broke if we don't have it, and I don't buy all of that. But we have asked to separate out the budget on the water to keep track of that. Try to keep current with the rates and the 218s for the delivery. In the event this thing falls out or down the road, it's almost like trying to help drowning people so they don't become addicted to that money. That money is for one-time uses on our system and takes care of some of the capital. So it doesn't become necessarily a dependency. So I think you bring some very interesting points, but if I'm hearing this board right, they're ready to listen. They're ready to discuss some of these things, and I'm anxious to see that committee formed and Mr. DeMars come in there and help frame that for us.
Well, I think you guys are headed in the right direction. Don't forget the fact that you're giving 100,000 acre feet of water at cost. I know you guys already are well aware of it, and another 100,000 at less than cost to Coachella, and that's that's so many jobs. It's so many futures in Imperial Valley for that amount, if that money came here.
So if I may, just there have been so many occasions where Mr. Jordan's come up here and I've listened because he's a thoughtful man, and he seems to be a man of who doesn't just come up here and upbraid IID or its staff. My thinking is that sort of input from the people who use the water we deliver is precisely what we're going to need in order to get off of the schneid. And so I just ask you, Mr. Jordan, if you concur that an apportionment is a healthy thing for the IID water system.
I really haven't completely haven't heard the argument. We haven't, it's relatively new. The idea of allocating the water, it's okay, it works. We use less than what our allocation would be, so we don't have a complaint. The problem is the high-use people and the water bank and how you manage the water bank and all the stuff that goes with creating a bureaucracy. In theory, it can be made to work. In theory, it can be made a mangle. And
that's right.
And I think that you got basically a good group of people that can be constructive and giving you suggestions, because they think so many more wrinkles than I do, or you can, because you're not living in it. They live it every day. The apportionment seems like a word term, but that's okay. If you want to call it Sally, you can call it Sally.
Well, it was between that and Harry. I take that it's a conditional yes, if it doesn't go the way of a bureaucratic mangle.
Well, right. I think you've got two issues. You got this issue, the apportionment is like an issue for 2014, or maybe late 2013, and you have an issue with a really good economy and a lot of water use, and today. And so you know, certainly my suggestions are one, but I'm sure there's a lot of other ones that you might be able to implement.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, I think what you said there on the mango, we to move this thing forward, we don't need to lose our momentum. So if we see that in this process that's where it's heading, we need to be real careful with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is the direction that we're heading there. I'd like to remind everyone that this is only the third board meeting for the new board. So that's kind of the message we're trying to get out there, and that we're getting positive feedback. That doesn't mean it's going to be an easy road, but we do need to move swiftly. Yes.
Howard Elmore, Brawley, California. You're getting a bunch of cousins today. Jesse, your report, you talk about the sea or the level of the river going to the sea going up. If we could, appreciate if you could pull that up. My family, we use this term cause and effect. And I don't know what, you gave a cause of maybe, but the fact is the sea, you see the number going to the sea going up. But having fought against the sea for my whole life, and Jesse's been involved with a lot of that time, the sea's going down. And it seems like it's continuing to go down. I mean, I haven't gone out there and put stakes and watched it, but just, the perception is it's been dropping quite a bit. And yet, you look at the last 4 years, the flow's been going up.
Remember, that's just IAD's portion to the sea. When you put Mexico's, then Mexico's has been going down, so that's why the sea's going down.
So Mexico's getting a lot better than us with their water conservation.
They're using it more, yeah.
And I assume Coachella is doing the same thing too.
We'll have to check that. I haven't checked theirs.
Okay, so, I mean, other people are doing it. There was also in your minutes, or your board packet, a deal about how the sea, you only talked about Hoover Dam when it was closed, that we had a restriction on our flow. 1964, and again, if you were to look at a graph to the Salton Sea, 1964, the federal government came in and told IID, you are going to use less water.
10%. 10%.
10% less water. And it's reflected in the level of the sea. So if you look at the sea, there's a fact. There's causes above that are causing this. There is ability to save water on the farmer's side. I guess my point is, look at the sea is reflecting that. And right now, there's got to be some big savings because it's going down. You're trying to say it's Mexico, but Mexico, it hasn't put that much water into the sea over the years as compared to the rest of the farmers in the valley.
Take a look at the total.
The total. But it'd be very interesting, I think, if you were to look at the levels of the sea. Thank you.
Thank you, Howard. Any other comments from the audience? Okay, for those farmers and the WCAB members in the audience, this presentation will be addressed again at Thursday's WCAB meeting. So staff, I'm sure, will be anticipating some further questions and details about today's presentation.
Matt, I just had one if I could, and
Yes.
it was in relation to the system of system conservation and the non-farm conservation. I would like to direct Jesse to come back on a regular basis with an update on the system conservation, not conversation, but anyway, the definite plan was something that was put out there in the past, and I'd like to bring it back to the table and see where we stand on different aspects of that.
Okay, Jesse just came back in the room. We're looking forward to monthly presentations, if not every meeting about where we're at on system and on-farm conservations as we move forward. There's some urgency that we've heard in the audience and out in the community, and also from the board. And Jesse's here.
Right.
We wanted to come to you here first part of the year and just tell you where we're at and then start going from there.
And then if we do, just to put in perspective, if we do move to apportionment, allocation, whatever you want to call it, a lot of these on-farm conservation measures might not work, because I know that we've looked at fields for on-farm conservation, and if you're over the allocation or over the apportionment, why on earth would you ever sign up for an on-farm conservation measure that you can't even get the benefit of? And I think the ones that we really want to target are the heavy users on ground that might be able to implement a system and actually save more water than guys that really can't save a whole lot. So if we can look at a baseline or any way that might work across the board, because the allocation does not work if you're moving to on-farm conservation. You're not going to gain any ground.
Well, that's why we're saying that we need to integrate all that, because, yeah, we don't want to be doing something and then losing somewhere else. And so we want to integrate all that. And that's what this committee will
effectively be putting a baseline out there for everyone to look at their ground.
So we're aware that we've got this problem with competing baselines.
Yeah.
You know, with all the technology we have and everything, we should have some graphs where the major spills are, where the major users are, and so
well, I
can see where to.
We can, yeah, we have all that information. Available.
I'd hope it could be reflected in the budget this year, that we go to farmers and really kick off a serious system of sit-downs with some of the larger users and identify their heavy use fields. And that's proactive on the IED side, because we have the data. They know where their fields are, and they might not want to touch them. But I think we have to be proactively looking around at the system and see where some of these 12-hour runs are, how we can mitigate in those areas, or even sequential watering if we just talk to guys. But, it takes planning on their side, how they lay out fields. It takes planning on everybody's side. So we just can't wait. And, this is our third meeting, but I keep asking for the same thing, and I don't want to keep saying it's going to be put off to the next meeting. I want to know that we're moving forward with on-farm conservation.
So that update will be coming at the next presentation, next meeting, Jesse?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, we've got a couple more items to get through the information agenda. Next up is the update on the Water Conservation Advisory Committee's issues discussed at the December 13th meeting. Al Kalin. This is page 60 of your agenda.
Good afternoon, Al Kalin, Westmoreland. I'm here to give you an update on what we discussed at our last WCAB meeting, which was on December 13th. But before I do that, I'd like to make a comment on what we were just talking about. Quite a few years ago, there was a fellow that worked here named Tim O'Halloran, and he'd come around and drop by our office maybe once a month and sit and talk about anything, but usually we found out what was going on at the district, and he found out what was going on with the farmers. And if you talk to other farmers out there, they really enjoyed his visits too. It was a really neat deal that it was the district and the farmers bonding together through Tim O'Halloran. And I brought this up to a past water manager, and his comment was he didn't intend to pay an employee to go out and have tea and crumpets with the farmers. And I think that's just the wrong idea. And I think we're turning around, but I think you need to look at that as a method. You need more interaction between the farmers and the district, and you haven't had that. There's been an adversarial relationship there for quite a few years, and I would urge you to look into that. You have some people in the district on the staff that have degrees in agriculture that are on good terms with all the the farmers. They worked with them. And those are the type of people you need to be sending out and discussing what's going on. And they need to be trained on what to, what to say and what to do. It's a PR program, if you will. And I think that'll go a long ways. When we met on December 13th, one of the items on our agenda, Josh Scott, he gave an update on system conservation projects. The first part of the Phase 1 is currently being implemented, he reported, and a major work authorization allowed for the request for proposal solicitation in October. Mr. Scott reported those proposals were being evaluated. In 4 to 5 years, he said measurement devices will be installed on all the delivery gates. In addition, Mr. Scott said that staff was looking for less expensive projects for the third phase rather than the proposed and costly Mid-Valley project. WCAB member Larry Cox pointed out that the WCAB did not approve the second phase of the system conservation projects and suggested a WCAB subcommittee could present their ideas and perspectives for infrastructure needed in the third phase. WCAB members felt the mid-lateral reservoirs proposed were inadequate and felt larger ones would be much more beneficial. It was also discussed that a few years back, North End farmer Howard Elmore made a presentation to the WCAB regarding the IID's only mid-lateral reservoir currently operating in the IID system. Mr. Elmore and his brother built the 30-acre-foot reservoir on their property adjacent to Vale 4 lateral and the heading of Vale 4A. They then turned the reservoir over to IID to operate. It has proved very beneficial. It's had rave reviews from the IID North End managers, the Sand Heroes, the farmers, the like. It was discussed that this is the type of mid-lateral reservoir IID needs to install. It has an excellent history, a proven track record, and it saves water. And everybody has positive things to say about it. Instead, Dr. Eckhart and his team at the time thought the small 8-acre-foot mid-lateral reservoirs were better suited for the definite plan. Obviously, the WCAB disagreed, but their voice was not heard. On other matters, WCAB member Jim Abadi reported on the WCAB Farm Unit Fouling Subcommittee progress and said that he had met with IID legal counsel Joanna Smith. Ms. Smith was studying the legal ramifications and is trying to develop an acceptable contract to use. It was discussed that this type of fouling program could be problematic during a supply-demand imbalance year. Darren Fillmore reported that applications for the on-farm conservation pilot program had been mailed out to all farmers, and 86 interested farmers had responded. Mr. Fillmore said that although the deadline for applying had passed, he was still accepting applications. The software that will be used to establish the baseline is currently being tested and the bugs worked out. The contracts will begin in January 1, 2013. The next WSA meeting is slated for this Thursday, January 10th. The agenda includes updating the WCAB bylaws, election of chairman and vice chairman, monthly division updates, the water reports, update on the solar field temporary fouling, and an update on water overrun and water department issues. Any questions?
Al, you saw the presentation today addressing the report that was under scrutiny on the water flows to the sea and the water sales by the IID. If you have any comments or questions about that, I'd appreciate those with staff as they're preparing for the next presentation of the WCAB.
I watch the level of the sea very closely because I live right next to it, and I've always enjoyed playing around it. It's been going down for the last 10 years, but oddly enough, this summer's rain that we had, it stopped that downward progress, and the sea right now is actually 2/2 of an inch or so above what it was this time last year. So that rain, whatever we had, and that large rain in the middle of the summer, had a big effect on the level of the sea. I don't know if these figures, if they included the water going to the sea, if that included the mitigation water also.
No, they did not. And Mr. Kidwell's, Merlin's figures correspond with yours as far as the incremental gain to the Salton Sea this year.
Yeah. Living right next to the Wiley Reservoir also, I shake my head every day when I see water being dumped into the sea because it's at capacity. There's got to be a way that you can regulate these reservoirs better management. And I do believe that the 12-hour reservoirs, 12-hour water orders are a big problem. Just think about it. You've got a pump going that's running 40 acres of sprinklers. If you've ever had to walk across 40 acres of sprinklers cleaning out the rainbirds, when you start the thing up, you have an appreciation for how hard it is to start a pump up. Once it gets going and the nozzles are clean, you don't want anything to happen. When the farmers or the irrigation foremen order water, they don't want that pump running out of water, so they might order a little extra water. The sand harrow, he gets chewed out if he doesn't deliver what's needed for that pump. So he might turn a little extra water in too. And then you turn it all off at once. And seldom, or well, I can't say seldom, but for the most part, I don't think the farmers are calling in 3 hours ahead of time like is being requested. I think that has to change. I know on weekends when my foreman is off and I'm in charge of irrigation, I call in and it's like they're surprised. You're calling to tell us you're going to turn the water off. That's fantastic. Well, I think you need to look at that closer and make a big point out of it. Another easy thing I think you could look at is sit down and figure out how many farmers are there that make up the majority of the water ordered. I can tell you from helping with the TMDO program, there's 437 farmers right now. I wouldn't be surprised if 75% of them use 90% of the water, or 75 of those farmers use 90% of the water. But those are the ones you might want to look at first. Concentrate on them. I don't have much use for public workshops. I think this is a one-on-one thing you have to do. That's what Tim O'Halloran did. And you need another Tim O'Halloran out there to be working with the customers. Any other questions?
Al, I just want to say congratulations for making the front page of I think it was a Sunday paper on the Salton Sea article, but good picture.
Well, I've always enjoyed the Salton Sea. I used to like to walk along the shore and beachcomb. And one day I discovered all these little green army men washed up on the shore. And some didn't have arms, some didn't have legs, some didn't have heads, but they were all wounded. And I started collecting them, and before long I had a 55-gallon barrel of these little green army men. And what it was is Mattel had a plastic injection plant in Mexicali. And so the culls, the ones that were wounded, they got thrown into the New River, and they floated down and washed up on the shore. So I was in fine shape. I could go to the school with a handful of army men, and I could trade a handful for a peanut butter and jelly sandwich at lunch. And I don't know. I've always enjoyed the Salton Sea, and enjoyed watching how it has evolved. It's ever changing. It's never going to go back the way it was. We can't think of how can we make it like it used to be. We have to figure out how we want it to be, and aim for that target.
What's your theory on the piles or concentrations of golf balls you've come across?
Well, that's thousands of golf balls wash up on the shore along the sea. Now, if you go to any golf course there, you'll see they sink when they go in the little water ponds on the golf course. And I believe it's there's a lot of golf courses along the New River, and they knock the balls into the river. The current carries them down to the sea. Once they enter the sea, now you're looking at water as 55 parts per thousand. Pacific Ocean water is 35 parts per thousand. So it's extremely dense, and the golf balls float in that water. So they rise up to the top, come off the bottom, and then they wash into the shore. So everybody wants to hit some golf balls, call me. We go out there.
Thank you, Al. Okay, we're on 11 information. This has been pulled also until the next meeting. Item 12, Energy Department General Managers, page 62 of your agenda package. This is Mr. Stills and Mr. Escalera.
Yes, Mr. President. In December, right before the Christmas holidays, IID conducted its affected system stakeholders meeting to discuss the results of the study that we had just completed. The generator feedback issue and the station service plan of service for generators around the IV substation. The meeting was productive. Most of the challenges that we received concentrated on the base case from the Cal ISO's Q that we used in formulating the affected system study. And most of them were challenging the validity of some of the projects not moving forward. Along those lines, I've told the generators and SDG&E and Cal ISO on the governor's call that IID would eliminate any project in the study that was not moving forward, but IID required substantiation of that fact by projects being taken out of Cal ISO's queue or their in-service date pushed back past the dates that we used. So we can't just rely on somebody telling us that information. We have to have an affirmation from the Cal ISO. The Cal ISO in San Diego have taken that activity of updating their queue as an action item prior to the end of January. If they do so, we will revisit the flows on that system and make adjustments to the study as we see them. Okay? Number 2. The Renewable Auction Mechanism, or RAM, is a simplified market-based procurement mechanism for renewable distributed generation projects greater than 3 megawatts and up to 20 megawatts. The CPUC adopted RAM for investor-owned utilities within their own balancing authority as a primary procurement tool for system-wide renewable distributed generation because it promotes competition, elicits lowest costs for ratepayers, and encourages development of resources that can utilize existing transmission and distribution infrastructure and contribute to their RPS goals. The CPUC initially authorized the utilities to procure 1,000 megawatts, but they've since expanded that to 1,299 megawatts through RAM by holding 4 auctions over 2 years, beginning in November 2011. The first RAM auction closed on November 15, 2011, resulting in CPUC approval of 13 renewable distributed generation contracts for only 140 megawatts in April of 2012. The second RAM auction closed on May 31, 2012, and they were only able to secure 362.8 megawatts. Out of that, San Diego was only able to secure 45 megawatts of distributed generation. With their lack of success in contracting RAM, San Diego filed an advice letter 2437-E at the CPUC requesting that they be allowed to contract distributed generation outside of their balancing authority area inside of IID's balancing authority area. Because this action would be good for development within IID's BA and on IID's transmission, which we would receive wheeling, and because we had two 20-megawatt projects that they issued PPAs contingent upon the RAM modifications by the CPUC, IID filed letters in support of this requested modification and the two projects with the CPUC. That was being heard by the CPUC today. There is opposition to that, but we don't know what the affected outcome will be. But that is 40 megawatts on IID's system that will be paying IID's wheeling if that's successful. And probably a lot more. That leaves about 700 megawatts somewhere that could go anywhere in the IOU, in the Cal ISO's BA or IID's BA if that's passed.
Carl,
Go ahead.
Who's opposing that?
I believe Southern Cal Edison has some opposition to it.
But they didn't meet the goal either.
Well, I don't think any of them have met the 1,299 megawatt goal, but they're not getting the amount that they thought they were going to get. San Diego at least knows that Imperial Valley is rich for potential renewable development. And when you look at these small distribution or distributed generation projects under 20 megawatts, they're not the large utility scale projects that you would normally just put on transmission. But if we are going to move them from our BA to their BA, they will go on transmission. So it'll be good for IID, it'll be good for Imperial Valley, it'll be good for economic development. Okay.
The next milestones on those small 20 megawatt projects, Carl, what are we looking at?
Well, basically, we need to get a feedback on what happened today. We have one email back from the CPUC's meeting today that there is opposition to it, but we don't have a definitive answer on what the commission is going to do.
Edison typically opposes San Diego's initiatives. It's some sort of IOU rivalry.
If that does go through, then the two projects that we have are both in the north end up there. One is Calapat and one is Tall Bear. If those go through, you'll probably see more smaller developments within Imperial Valley that are bidding into that auction. Okay.
Carl, I had a question. I also attended that stakeholders meeting, and there was a lot of pushback, I know, from San Diego, and then a lot of the people regarding projects that I think there were some wind projects that were on there that they said will never come about. And with those wind projects, it pushes it way over the threshold where it impacts our system. What is our ability to get any money if there aren't impacts to our system? Can we at least get something out of those projects? Or?
Well, yeah, it goes to the allocation methodology that we've established.
Okay.
And what we're looking at is really looking at a no free rider theory. They will be impacting our system. It's just a watt amount. And we have a procedure set up to determine the percentage of impacts to that, and they will pay a proportionate cost to the impact.
Because they're taking away capacity from internal production or generation.
Correct. And we're looking at getting dollars to beef up our system, and they may not push an element to be replaced over the threshold that we would normally replace an element, which would be if we were looking at an N-0 or no contingency outage, 100% overload. Or if it's under emergency and N-1 or N-2, we look for that 110% threshold because we can run it for 10% over for a period of time without burning the unit down.
Okay.
So we look at that percentage of allocation, and they will pay some impact to that, and then the next group that comes along will pay their proportionate share until we have to replace the element.
Okay.
Carl, is there any information available for the board on the item you discussed earlier, the RAM item?
Actually, I sent you letters this morning that we sent out yesterday. You should have received them in your email on both support for the REM and support for the two projects.
Where I saw it.
Well, thank you. Mr. Escalera?
Thank you, Mr. President. Real quickly, if I may, if you recall, we've informed the board on and off about the increased copper theft that not only IID is experiencing, but all of the utilities and agencies, and even some now has trickled down to the private sector. If you recall, about a month or so ago, we had actually somebody go up and steal over 4,000 feet of wire that was live. They actually went up in a rural area that was feeding a pump up in the La Quinta area, cut the wire down, and stole the wire. Just 3 weeks ago, we had another similar incident, this is more in the downtown area, where we had an individual, again, go up on one of our poles to attempt to steal copper off a live line. The individual was not as fortunate this time. He was electrocuted. The first time that it was called in by his we know he had accomplices because they called it in and the fire department couldn't find him. So when our troubleshooter went out to correct the outage that he had caused, we found the individual underneath a tree, severely injured, had exit wounds on his knee and his legs and his arms. He was transported to the hospital. He since has been released. We have charged him. I should say the sheriff department has charged him with theft, and we will prosecute him to the fullest extent. The reason the sheriff department did not take him into custody is that they did not want to be responsible for the additional medical care that he's going to need because of the fact that he was stealing wire. We bring this up because we've had a number of instances now where we've had live active wire being stolen, and we were waiting for something like this to happen. It's a dangerous game that they're playing. Our concern again is not just for the individual that's actually doing the theft, but when they steal grounding wire that's intended to safeguard not only our employees but the general public as they come near or contact one of our facilities. They are playing a very dangerous game. We have met. We've formed a committee made of IID, Energy, SCI, internal SCI, and communications. We formulated a plan. We're going to beef up our existing outreach program on theft. We plan to contact on a normal rotational basis all of the recyclers, not only here but in the Coachella Valley, to make sure that they're not facilitating the sale of or the theft of copper. In fact, we've had two very important laws come into effect this year that deal with theft. One of them is the minimum penalty for a recycler caught having stolen utility type grade copper was $250. The minimum has been raised to $1,000. We think that's going to help. Also, the other law that came into effect is that there's a minimum amount of copper they will now buy. I think it's $40, and if they will only be allowed to be paid in cash or in check. And if you pay in cash, they must supply the recycler with address, ID, and they take a picture of the facility, of him and of the material that he's brought in. Or if in check, or if it's a check, it's kind of the same thing, except they mail it to a known address, no P.O. boxes, and they don't get paid till for 3 days. So we're hoping finally the utilities have gotten over the hump. Believe it or not, the recycling industry has a very strong lobby in Sacramento, but I think we finally have gone over that hump. And I just wanted to bring, one of the things we also want to do in our program is we're going to make aware all of the recyclers of the new laws, and hopefully that'll put a little bit of fear. And then we're going to develop a little booklet that we actually have borrowed from SCE which has all of our type of wire in it. So they'll be able to recognize what is a utility grade type of wire and not something else.
Mario, was this accident in Imperial County or Riverside?
It was in the Coachella area.
Oh, so that would be Riverside County.
Yes, it would be.
And I'm wondering how aggressively the district attorney will prosecute, because it's usually up ultimately to the district attorney.
We haven't talked to the district attorney, Director Glenda, but we certainly have talked to the sheriff and law enforcement up in the La Quinta area, and they have assured us that they're going to pursue it very, very aggressively. We've had great cooperation from actually all the agencies, both here in Imperial and in La Quinta area.
Thank you.
That's all I have, President.
Okay. Any other questions for Mario from the board or comments from the audience today? Okay, thank you, Mario. Okay, this moving into the action section of the item. It's 4:30. We want to take a 5-minute break.
Sounds good. Yes.